2. All righty, we are live, and we've got a good morning show planned for us today. We've been lucky enough, while people are getting in, we are joined again. I believe, Mr. Terry, this is your 5th time. We're gonna have to figure out some kind of little gift or something like SNL does that you're in the 5-timers club already.
Actually, if you count the one Q&A deal and all that, this is actually number 7.
Oh my God! Okay, so you've even surpassed the 5-timers club. We're gonna have to get something. We're gonna have to do something to honor that. That's great. And like I told you just a minute ago before we went on, the people are always getting with me and Jason on the social media platforms, and they cannot get enough of you and Tony. And we're gonna have to get both of y'all on.
Oh yeah. For the ones that have joined us so far, Bud and I were talking right before we went live about, can you imagine me and Tony Love on together, not talking blood and gut shit, but telling the funny stories, because there's lots of them. And
I can't even imagine that. I know when we do get that on, that'll be one of the biggest ones to date for sure.
Now, going back to how many times I've been on, I would not turn down a silver pistol. Food for thought.
That would be a hell of a good introduction to the 5-timers or 7-timers club. I wish I may have to make one out of tinfoil or something and get it in a presentary box and make it out with a little placard to you. I don't think I can get a good silver pistol, but I can get you a tinfoil one and make it for you.
That's probably another pistol is probably the last thing I need, because then I'd have to buy a 4th gun safe.
Oh shit! There you go. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, every time I buy an AR, my wife wants to know where's hers, and I said, "Oh, I bought this for you, honey." So
that's the best answer you could possibly give.
Oh hell yes! Well, last year I went to the 5th group reunion in September, and we got to shoot all the weapons. And I told her about that, and she's like, "Well, I'm going next year." So she's going with me this year, next month.
Hell yeah!
Just so she can shoot all the weapons.
I was about to say, you got you a damn good woman right there.
Oh, I'm telling. Well, we've been shooting together. She grew up on a farm, and let's see. I've been doing Civil War cavalry reenacting for 30-some years. So there's guns and horses mixed together. And then I bought her a horse for our wedding present. I bought her a horse that used to belong to Charlie Pride, the singer.
Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah, big fancy Tennessee Walker. And then we started doing the cowboy action shooting, where you dress old cowboy clothes and 2 pistols, a rifle, and a shotgun, and you're shooting live ammo at targets and all that. Then we started doing the cowboy mounted shooting, and she was shooting 45 Colts. I bought her 357s first, and she's like, when we started doing the mounting shooting, you have to use 45 Colt. She said, I don't need 2 sets of guns. So I sold her 357s, and she shoots 45s just like the boys do.
Woo!
Oh yeah!
Wow.
Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Yeah.
I love that. That's if I can I've got a numerous slew of favorite or guns that I want, but the 2 guns I want are a 1911 45 and a Browning high power. I could die a happy man if I ever own one of those.
And all the guys talk about the Browning high powers, and I don't see what is so great about the high power as opposed to, like, say, the 1911. I don't see the attraction or whatever.
I think it's
But
built up, I think it's built up a bit of a mystique. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a wonderful weapon and it's got a hell of a mag capacity, but I think it's built up a mystique of its own by being associated with y'all, to be honest with you.
and that could be, when we got there, we were all issued 1911s. I was afraid of them because, I grew up in an age where we didn't have all these, except for a 1911 and a high power, maybe. Everything was revolvers. And right after we got there, one of the guys that I went over with, that I went through training group with, everybody goes to town and buys either a Western gun rig or a shoulder holster. Well, this guy had a shoulder holster and he was practicing quick draw. And you don't do that when you're locked and loaded. And he went to whatever he did, either went to holster the gun or pull it out. It went off and the bullet went in his hip and it came out right above his knee. And he ended up losing his leg. And that convinced me that I'm going to stick with revolvers. So while I was over there, I carried a 38 revolver. And you see that on that one picture of me.
Mm-hmm.
I was just scared.
On your wall.
Yeah, I was just scared of semi-automatics because of that, which was stupid, really, especially since I grew up with guns. But I never owned a semi-automatic pistol until probably 1990, and I bought a Ruger P89.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Which I still have. I keep that in the nightstand. And
that's a good gun to have, though. My grandfather had a P90.
And now I have two 1911s. I've got a Springfield Armory XD45. And that's okay for carrying somewhere, but it's no good for concealed carry because it's so goddamn big and heavy. And let's see, what else do I have? Well, of course, I got all my cowboy guns, but I don't know. I got quite a few pistols.
What's your favorite pistol that you've got?
The more I carry my 1911 as my concealed carry. The longer I carry it and the more comfortable I am with it. I think my favorite's that Ruger P89, but I'm really comfortable now with the 1911.
Wow. Okay.
And I'll tell you, you don't have to spend $1,000 for a 1911. I paid $425 for mine. It's a Rock Island Armory. And if you read the reviews on it, they are way up there.
Oh, yeah.
But $425,
That's not bad.
You can buy a Kimber for, I don't know, 11, 12, 1400. Yep. And I'm hearing nothing but people complaining about the Kimbers lately.
Yeah, I mean, you can get, that's why I was just kind of astonished what you just said about, getting a good one for four or around 400 or a little over, because you can, I mean, you looking at the new ones, and as a matter of fact, just for instance, Larry Vickers, who it was a Delta Force operator, he's got a custom 1911 out now that I think is, almost $2,200 or $2,500. Yeah, just because it's got his name on it and is customized and silver barreled or whatever they do to it.
If you're shooting in some of these disciplines, competition shooting and that, yeah, you're going to spend more. But just for everyday concealed carry or target shooting or whatever, you don't need to spend all that kind of money.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'll be honest with you. I've got a lot of shotguns. I've got a lot of Snake Charmer 410s here, and I've got 3 pistols, but my mother also keeps her pistol here, and I've got a deer rifle, and then of course I've got my rifle, my whatever. It's legal. There's no crazy clips or anything. It's an AR, but I still feel for personal defense wise, I feel safe with my Remington Model 1100 semi-automatic. I can load that thing up with slugs and just tear you a new asshole. And then I can also get I've got a Glock, and that's what I carry for my everyday carry. Or I've got a Ruger 380 that is quite small and quite powerful. And I either let my mom carry that or I'll carry that. And those are really the only weapons I mean, I've got 4 and I feel completely satisfied with all of those.
I won't comment on 380s. I think
they're weak. They're weak as hell. And if you don't clean them, I've already noticed I've got a lot of issues. Like if I don't clean it and stick on top of it. But for mom, it's so small. That's one of the reasons I got it. For her, it's perfect for her. But I'd much rather, once she gets to where she can handle a little bit more torque, to bump her up to something more than a 380, preferably a 9mm. Preferably. 9.
So, looking at my screen, something doesn't look right. I don't see any. Okay, now we got a comment. Normally you see the comments over on the right-hand side of the screen when people ask a question like Brad just did. I don't see any of that.
I'm wondering. I don't know. You should be. That's strange. I don't know. Maybe they'll start popping up now that people are commenting, because there for a minute we weren't getting anything out.
Because normally it shows like how many people are watching.
We've still got a slow number coming in. Jason is on. He just commented, and he's got he put out a tweet letting people know that people are coming in. So it's kind of good. We've had a nice little chat about some weapons and stuff.
I agree with Jason. Why spend $1,200 on a pistol? Spend $400 and get the rest of the money. Use it for training or, getting to know the gun. That's a problem. Is people, they're buying guns and carrying them, but they don't really know,
They want Gucci guns like they see Grand Thumb and all these big guys carrying, and they've got no idea what they're doing with them. Panama Brad said he got a Norinco 1911 in that price range, built good, like my AK Norinco and Polytech I got before they got expensive. I've heard the Norinco AKs are pretty decent considering, but I've got no experience with their pistols. I as a matter of fact, didn't know they built pistols.
I didn't know they made pistols, but
no, I did not either. We've got 6 people coming in now. Mr. Terry, would you feel like chatting a bit? Would you want to go into some of our glossary already, or do you have anything else you'd like to cover before we get into?
If we've only got 6 on right now,
just
maybe the 7 that are on, we could knock some questions out, or just general bullshit type questions before we get into all the terms. Somebody ask a question.
Yeah, Jason, if you've got some of your questions, go ahead and hit us one. I've got one that somebody asked me on Instagram the other day. When I post, we were talking about AK-47s, and a lot of people were talking about, the guys had the CAR-15s. No one was using AK-47s, and I sadly got in a big shouting match, and I quickly backed away because I knew I was right, and I quit. But can you talk a little bit about, I know CCS was more prevalent in using AK-47s, but did any of y'all at CCC use the AKs, or was that okay?
Now, you got to understand, too, the difference between the Recon teams and the Hatchet Force. In the Hatchet Force, we all carried our, at that time they were CAR-15s or M16s. But on the Recon teams, and Joe Walker was a good example of that. They would wear NVA uniforms. They'd carry NVA weapons. And I've had people ask me, well, what would be the advantage of that? Well, the advantage, if you've got a recon team, and let's say an average recon team would be 9 men, 3 Americans and 6 indigenous. If you get in contact, the sound of an AK and an M16 are so completely different. There's no mistaking what weapon is being fired. Well, if you get in a firefight, those NVA hear a bunch of AKs going off. It may be just enough to get them to stop shooting and give that recon team time to DD-MOW and get the hell out of there. Because they may think they're in a firefight with their own people, especially if they're wearing NVA uniforms and the whole 9 yards. So recon teams, it was, I don't know if the right word would be common, because I mean, I didn't go out with the recon teams since I was Hatchet Force, but I've read so many and seen so many pictures of recon teams with AKs. And even if it just bought you a few seconds or a minute or two, that could be the difference between coming home or not. So I can see infantry. I'm going to answer that in a minute. I think it was a good idea for the recon teams using AKs. Now, as far as the M16, can you put his infantry DMRs? Okay. It got a bad rap. Well, the reason it got a bad rap is, and I'll just use myself as an example. When I got shot the first time at the end of March, 69, I got shot, but my first round hit the bolt of the guy that shot me, and it did not extract the round, and it tried to feed another one in. So while I was in the hospital in Japan, they switched us all over to CAR-15s. But at the same time, they discovered that the gunpowder that was being used in the 223 rounds, or 5.56, it was the wrong kind of powder. And that's what was causing the rifle to jam up. And everybody I've ever talked to that had a problem, it was the same exact problem. It did not extract the round, and it tried to feed another one in. And it was attributed to the bad powder. Once they switched powders, I never heard of another gun jamming.
There's a wonderful book out that covers this exact thing that Terry's talking about, and extremely sad details. It's called Operation Swift Sword on the Marine Corps, and it talks about they're one of the group that gets the first M16s for the grunts, and they find the boys with jams, boys in foxholes that have been executed with their rifles broken down, trying to get it maintained and working again. And they had just been executed because they couldn't get jams out. It was double feeding, like Terry said. It's just utter nightmare.
So the type of powder, every gun, there's ideal powders for that type of gun or that caliber of rifle. There's other powders that'll work, but they're not as good, and you could have problems. And that's what happened with the M16. And so that's why it got such a bad rap. Mm-hmm. If you take away that issue, and it's maybe because it's what I used, but I'll take an AR any day over an AK. Mm-hmm. I think the AKs were built, they're more cheaply built, but at the same time, I think Kalashnikov designed a gun for the climate and the type of use that the AKs were getting. It was probably the perfect gun. for them. I'm just an AR guy. Let's see. Do you know what AK-47 were most make Chinese stamped or milled woodblock stack versus? I think, Brad, almost all the AKs that I ever saw, which quite a few, they were Russian-made AKs.
Yes, and there were quite a few. I've found a great photo that I'm going to share pertaining to this, or I may have already shared it. That the guys captured a wonderful, I believe it was a Romanian or Czechoslovakian one with the hand grip that I forgot what they call it. It's called a dong, but it's got that strange foregrip on it, and it had Czech or Belarusian or what have you markings on it. One of the rare ones.
I never saw one of them. Huh.
Yeah, it was a recon team that had snagged it off someone. So that's a very rare one.
So yes, there were, like Romanian especially, there were AK variants made in Romania. Now the Chinese did supply AK-47s also, but I'm going out on a limb here because I'm making a guess, but I would think that they probably were used more further north, mainly because the Russians were providing, truckloads, and they'd come down the trail. So I think you're seeing more of the Russian-made ones than anything else the further south you got.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Let's see. There we go.
What was a weapon mix for a Hatchet Force platoon like? Okay. Do you want to, Bud, do you want to get into the makeup of Hatchet Force versus Recon team? Because that'll help answer this question.
I believe so. That would be a good one to start with.
Okay. So based on a number of different questions that were asked, what we're going to do is talk about the differences in makeup between a Hatchet Force and a Recon team. The average Recon team, and I'm using the word average because, again, it's based on what I've read because I wasn't on a Recon team. Most Recon teams, a light team would be like 5 or 6 guys, maybe 2 Americans and 4 yards or nungs or whatever. What I call a regular Recon team would be 9 men, and they could carry a whole mix of different weapons but in a Hatchet Force, so in the Hatchet Force, we had a company, and the company was roughly, and it would vary depending on our losses and stuff, but on average, about 100 to 105 men. So the makeup of the Hatchet Force was, you had a captain who was the company commander, and you had a lieutenant who was the executive officer. Then we had, at CCC, we had 3 platoons. Each platoon was made up of 3 squads. So you had a platoon leader, which is usually, one of the more experienced and more senior. And this was a complete opposite of the Recon teams where rank had no bearing on it. It was experience. In the Hatchet Force, it was more the rank structure. You got a captain and a lieutenant, and then you got senior NCOs as your platoon leader. So in each of the 3 squads, you had, when I first got there, they were still using BARs. But shortly afterwards, we got the M60s. So in each squad, you had a M79 guy, you had a M60 guy, and everybody else in that squad, which a squad was like, about 9 guys maybe, plus an American squad leader. Everybody else was carrying M16s or later Car 15s. So in every squad, you had an M79 and an M60. So in a platoon, you'd have 3 M60s, 3 M79s, and a whole bunch of M16s. in a company, just multiply that by 3, you'd have like 9 M79s and 9 M60s. So we got some heavy firepower. Let's see, did a platoon bring with them? And that, that was standard. So almost every Hatchet Force operation, it was the same setup, at least in my company. Americans, when I first got there, I thought, oh my God, we can carry whatever we want. So I went down to supply and told Bob Howard I wanted Swedish K, because they look cool. They're small, folding stock, and all that crap. And he said, well, I'll give you one, but you'll come back to the M16. And sure enough, after one time of carrying it, I came back because it had a slower rate of fire. The ammo was heavier, and it was just, I don't know. I just, it wasn't for me. I like the M16.
Yeah, I could see, and especially after hearing John Plaster can talk about his first mission with the Swedish K, and it was just no good. Here's one from Jason, since we're still on rifles and weapons.
I know that there were some M16s that had scopes on them, but I would say that was rare. In December '69, I got punished. I had a Montagnard girlfriend, and we had a lieutenant that didn't like that, probably because he wasn't getting any. But so I got punished, and I got sent to Leghorn for the entire month of December '68. And in the middle of December, when they started hitting us every day, the first round, which I'm assuming was an RPG, but it could have been a recoilless rifle. And in my pictures, unfortunately, we can't show them now. You'll see the first round that they fired hit the corner of our ammo bunker, and it cut the coax cable. So the next day when they came up to repair everything and get the commo back going, they brought me a Remington 700 BDL, which is a 30-06, very popular even today, a deer rifle. It's a bolt action 30-06, and it had a 12 power scope on it. And they said, well, maybe you'll get a chance to use it. And I did. And there was an NBA officer who, what's a nice way of saying it? He got a major
wrong place at the
he got a major headache. He was probably, I guess, distance wise, it wasn't like a super long shot. He was probably 250 yards away. And in one of my pictures, I have a picture of where he was standing at the time. But overall, scoped rifles, generally speaking, it was too much. You've already got 75 or 100 pounds of gear on your back. So now you're carrying an M16, and then if you add, even though it didn't weigh much, it's the bulk, So scopes, unless it was for a specific purpose, like, like for instance, you're going to do a hit on somebody. Yeah, the scope would make it a little more accurate at a longer distance.
There's some we've got a few more questions before we get into the terminology part, but guys, there are a few CCS as well as CCN recon teams, and I'm sure the CCC guys would do it also, but I know of a CCS man who went to either the 4th or 9th Division sniper school. And sometimes on static road watches, guys would have sniper rifles when they were trying to cause trouble on road watches. So they did take them out, but like Terry said, it was few and far between, considering how close the guy Terry and them were to the enemy. You know, you didn't need a sniper rifle to shoot somebody 10 feet from you.
Yeah, and usually you were shooting at noise anyway.
Yeah.
You know.
Let's see here.
Did you ever see anything about East German? You know, that's a question that could be talked about forever, and you'd never come up with a firm consensus. The thing is, there's a number of examples of, for lack of a better term, I'll call them Eastern European people with the NVA. Now, it's a very for sure thing that there were Russians. It's a very sure thing that they were Chinese. I think in one of my other interviews I talked about, I had for years, I had a brand new Chinese uniform that I brought home because the guy didn't need it anymore. And there was no question he was Chinese. So I had a uniform, and I was, it's like, okay, here's proof that there's Chinese. But there's a number of recon teams that had experiences with all they could say was Eastern European, and that was based on the accent, the dialects, or whatever. So I would say, why not East German?
I can fully confirm, infantry, that East Germans, I'm sure men were there, but I know for an absolute fact there was an East German nurse in the CCC AO, because I spoke to Kent White this year, who has wrote some great novels based on his recon experiences, to where he saw a blonde-haired, light-skinned female in a beret and some sort of not NVA camo, but camo nonetheless, and carrying medical packs and such. And they are fully under the auspices that she was a East German medical student, and they out there training NVA and somewhat rudimentary medical skills. So I can confirm that, at least on my part.
Yeah. So East German doesn't surprise me at all. If I had to pick the top three foreign advisors, or whatever we want to call them, I would say Russian, Chinese, and East German.
Cubans as well. You got to add the Cubans in there.
Yeah, there was apparently some Cubans, and apparently some other, again, Eastern European, but unknown what countries they
nationality.
were from. Yeah. Could have been Swedish, Danish, who knows, Norwegian.
Yeah.
Let's see. How did it work to have recon teams and Hatchet force on bright light duty? Were they both there at the same time? No. It's whoever got assigned bright light duty. Yeah, it kind of depended who was on bright light. Part of it depended on the teams that were on the ground. What was their mission? What were they doing? And if it was a mission that in all probability was going to involve very large numbers of bad guys, then we'd put a platoon on bright light duty from the Hatchet force. If it was routine bright light duty, and by routine I mean you just got a reinforcing unit on standby in case a recon team gets in really deep trouble, or a pilot gets shot down, something like that. Generally, you're going to send in just another recon team as the bright light. But we always had, in the Hatchet force, we always had a platoon that was kind of I don't want to use the word standby, but kind of like we could scramble the platoon together fairly quickly, and it would just be a matter of the choppers picking us up and getting us to where we got to go. But
and a nice little tidbit to add to this, since we're talking bright lights, and you earlier spoke about the makeups of recon teams as opposed to hatchet forces. And you mentioned Joe Walker. He instituted, the heavy teams,
yep.
which would kind of jumping into our vocabulary of the day. He ran sometimes upwards of 11 to 15 men.
Exactly.
And sometimes the teams, the recon teams that were tasked with bright light duties would be teams like that. Montana was another one that they go in heavy with nothing but ammo and act essentially like a small hatchet force, if you will.
When we were on bright light duty, because on bright light duty, you would go to Doc Toe and sit around just waiting on the call. Like you just said, mainly your main loadout for a bright light was ammo. Because if you're going in on a bright light, that means you're going in to fight. So you want to be heavy on ammo, light on other crap. So it wouldn't be a normal loadout. Like, for instance, you'd take some claymores, you maybe take some C4, a lot of grenades, and a lot of bullets. Because you're going to be going in and fighting. So you want to be heavy on that stuff, but light, like you're not going to take a week's worth of rations and stuff like that.
Probably no rations at all, to be honest.
Sometimes, but yeah, normally, because we'd fly up to Doc Toe in the morning and we'd come back to camp at night. So you'd take your day's rations. Because generally, if you're on a bright light, it's something where you're going to be in and out the same day. You're going in to try to pull somebody's ass out of the fire. And so it's not like you're going to be in there for a week. So a day's rations,
Well, we've got two more questions.
Lean mean. Let's see. I was wondering how you normally shoot in combat, train purely. Let me put it like this. 99% of the time when you're in a firefight, you don't see the people that are shooting at you. So it's really the point and shoot. And I know when I was a cop, we learned after I got out of the Army, I actually taught some of it, the point and shoot. Because all you're shooting at is either the muzzle flashes or maybe even just the sound. And so your sights really, especially if you're firing either bursts or just full auto and wasting your ammo, because you don't see what you're shooting at. You're just shooting at a general area. So I learned point and shoot actually when I was in high school, and we'd go out shooting because I could do it, and I was showing my buddies how to do it because they couldn't understand how can you point in a general area and hit the target. Well, part of it's instinct. Some guys can't do it, period. But in a firefight, you've still got to put lead down range to try to suppress the fire. So, yeah, I mean, point and shoot is something that it really wasn't taught in training, but it's something that should have been because, so much of the time. Now, if you're shooting in, Afghanistan, for instance, you're shooting at longer distances and it's wide open and all that. Generally, you see what you're shooting at. So using your sights would be critical. But in the jungle, yeah, point and shoot was most of it.
There's a great lean mean if you're looking for more in depth. The best person who's explained this would be Dick Meadows and Dick Thompson. But Dick Meadows' book, The Quiet Professional, if I'm not mistaken, he does a whole entire article on training and getting ready for SOG, and he mentions a lot about this, about shooting plates with BB guns or 22s with just pointing and shooting and getting very, very good, much like Terry's speaking about, to where you literally saw nothing. You heard muzzle flashes or saw muzzle flashes, heard them, and you went to that area, like Terry said. They weren't seeing a lot of people unless they were rushing you to kill you.
When I would take my platoon down to the range to practice immediate action drills and stuff, I would take a stick or, something big enough, like say about the size of a 2x4, and just stick it in the ground at the berm. And then when we do our IAD drills, and sometimes we just have contests to have the yards firing from the hip or up a little higher, but not using their sights. And we'd have contests to see who could hit that stick. And that was to teach them instinctive shooting or point and shoot, like that.
Wow. Let's see. Jason's got two more before we start our show for the day, so to speak.
What did he do? Sit up all night coming up with questions? Before you got the boxing gloves, what would happen? You're exactly right. Legit gunfights. And that was the whole problem, is sometimes the yards, they'd get into these arguments over who knows what. And there were too many guys getting shot. You can't take their guns away from them and then give them to them when it's time to go out on a mission. So they always had their weapons. And one guy gets pissed at another one. Next thing you know, they're whipping out their guns and wanting to shoot each other. And so Frank Bellatier got this idea, and he had somebody back home send him the boxing gloves. And then, if you obviously Jason's seen at least pictures, if not the video, we would have at our evening formations, if we were aware that somebody had a grudge against somebody else, we'd put the boxing gloves on them and let them fight it out. And before we started, we made sure that they understood that this is going to be the end of it between you two fighting. Whoever wins the argument or whatever you're fighting about, but that's the end of it, and there's not going to be any more between you two. And they were pretty honorable in that respect,
They duke it out too on the video. Good matches, boy.
It was actually hilarious watching them because they had no idea what's a boxing match, and so you put boxing gloves on this guys and you give them some loose set of rules and let them go at it. It was funnier than hell. And,
guys, I'll share that footage has recently popped up, and I had no idea until I shared it, and Terry let me know that's his video, and he's actually in it in his pool with some of the guys. But I'll share that to where y'all can see some of the yard boxing competitions. Y'all get a kick out of that. Let's see, we've got another Jason one. Personal question.
What was your foreign language? It was not required. Some guys were, I use the term lucky enough. They went to the Defense Language Institute, which was in Monterey, California. So who was going to turn that back in the 60s? Who's going to turn down a chance to go learn a foreign language? From what I remember, and I never got to go to it because I got out of training group. I wanted to go to Vietnam. But Vietnamese and Russian were the two biggest languages at that time, you know, because the Russian, of course, you know, everything over in Europe, you know, with the Cold War and all that. And then in Vietnam, of course, learning Vietnamese. I didn't do any of that, but when I got to Vietnam and I had my platoon, I still have all the handwritten sheets. My interpreter and I, we would get together in the evenings sometimes, and I was building a dictionary of the Montagnard words and the English equivalents, because I thought it was important for me to be able to speak Montagnard as much as it was for them to understand the English commands. So I kind of learned, I kind of learned some of the Montagnard dialects OJT, you know, because there was no formal training on that. And there definitely was no formal training on the Montagnard dialects. It was just Vietnamese.
Yeah, I mean, some of the one of the CCN men, Gary Robb, if I'm not mistaken, he helped out to translate the Bible into from English to Montagnard to help them translate the Bible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He was quite the gentleman.
What was really difficult with this, with me learning, is you've got all the different tribes, which I think we're going to go into later. So the different dialects were different. So it's almost like speaking different languages for each dialect. And you'd have like my platoon was made up. We had some Rade, we had Banar, Sadang, all in a group of 7 or 8 guys. You had all this mix, and they could talk to each other, and they all knew some of the other dialects, so they could carry on a conversation. But it was difficult for me trying to learn all the same word in all these different dialects.
Oh, I can imagine. I've heard some of the guys that could speak it fluently and all that, and some of the older guys can actually still speak it, and I heard some of it at SOAR, and it blew my mind. They were able to pick it up and actually can still speak it fluently because there were some Montagnards at SOAR this year, or last year, I should say. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very amazing. They were there with the Mike Force and Save the Yard program, which I donated to both. I
love my yards. I'll tell you what. I love them.
I can imagine. You can tell, and that's why I'm going to share that video. That comes through very, very much in the videos with y'all.
And I mean, it didn't hurt that I had a Montagnard girlfriend the whole time I was there.
I'm sure they loved you for that.
Oh yeah, and it didn't hurt the time I went down to the village and I drank the village chief under the table with rice wine. Ooh. So then, so that kind of elevates you to this status of a godlike. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Well, you know, and we've had a lot of questions on some of the other interviews about that. How did you handle seeing your buddies get killed or missing in action, or just the stress and strain of combat and all that? And everybody handled it differently. I think I was 20 years old when I got over there. I just turned 20 the week before I left for Vietnam. I drank. When I came home the second time, I was drinking 2 cases of Budweiser a day. And then I went cold turkey, you know. I realized that was a quick ticket to nowhere. But unfortunately, some guys did dope. A lot of us drank. And that was our way of coping. Because if you lose somebody, no matter how close you were to them, life goes on and you may be on a mission the next day, you know. And so you had to, get your head screwed on straight. And for me anyway, the booze was the way of dealing with it. So
that's a common thing amongst I mean, not just SOG, but all of our Vietnam veterans. I mean, the Marine men I speak with, a lot of them found solace in the booze. So I'm just glad you were able to get it under control, and you're still here with us and able to share.
One of the things that I've always tried to tell the younger guys, the rest of your life is going to be what you make out of it, not what somebody else makes out of it, not what the pills make out of it, not what the booze makes out of it, but what you make out of it. So you just got to get your mind on straight and decide what kind of life do I want to have, Do I want to be a piece of shit and live in a tent out in the woods, or do I want to have a good job and have money and nice house and nice car and all that shit? You just got to make up your own mind. And
carry through and be headstrong with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like now we're about to the point. We've got one more question, if you wouldn't mind. It's about the yards, and I think since we're talking about them, I guess we might as well.
Yeah, lean mean. That's a good one. The yards were what we call animists. In other words, a lot of their religion and beliefs revolved around animals and that type of thing. So they had a lot of, what do you want to call it? Superstitions. They had a lot of built-in, just by their upbringing and that with all that, they just had a lot of built-in ideas and beliefs, and it was all based on animal stuff. So that was kind of interesting, because that's something that, coming from middle-class U.S., it's not something that I was ever exposed to. So it took a little while to kind of get used to that.
Yeah, that's very interesting reading about in many of the books and everything. And the Montagnards are animist, and I don't know if deists, but animist would be the best. And everything is living. The bushes, the trees. They don't kill bugs just to kill them because they're annoying. Everything is living. So I always found that to be very, they're like the Native Americans. They are quite in tune with their surroundings and their jungle and their home.
And very superstitious. Oh my God. Oh my God. My girlfriend made me a little, I'll call it a necklace. It was just a couple of pieces of colored string, and then there was this little square, not very big, maybe 2 inches by 2 inches, and it was red material with some designs woven into it with thread, and inside of it was a folded up, you could tell that it was folded up paper, but that was just to give it the body, to make it kind of rigid. But I was told to wear that on every mission because it would keep me from getting killed. So, that was their belief system, that if they did something like that, like a good luck charm, kind of like Americans would wear the St. Christopher medal, So I wore mine every mission that I went on, and I'm still here.
Wow. I was, each one y'all at CCC, and I'm sure some of the other ones probably had it, but I know the CCN guys, they had the Buddhas and everything, and they made the American team leaders get Buddhas, and when the stuff would go down, and they put the Buddhas in their mouth, because if you die with the Buddha in your mouth, you're instantaneous. It's going to nirvana or what have you.
Yeah, and we didn't have any. I never saw any of that kind of stuff. It was just more the superstitious ideas.
Oh yeah, like the odd numbers, and you can't can't go out with a I don't know if it was odd or even. The numbers have to be a certain, not 5 or 6. Stuff like that was they didn't mess around with that.
Okay.
Let's see here. Yeah, how would you like to go about this?
You've got that list of
yeah.
subjects that we kind of put together yesterday.
Yeah.
Because we're an hour in already.
That's since we've covered a lot. If people if they're wanting to chime in once we get going, but I think I think the S's. I've been getting a lot of info when I refer to people being off of Recon or Hatchet forces going into the S's. I think you describing what the S's are, S1s and etc.
So for everybody listening, what we kind of decided otherwise we could be here for a week. We're going to go into the S's and all that. If you have a question that specifically relates to the S's, ask your question now and we'll try to answer it. If you're going to ask me a question about, I don't know, something else that's not the topic we're talking on now, we'll try to eventually get to your question, but to kind of keep things moving along, we'll try to answer pertinent questions as we go along, so the questions don't just build up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the S's, people. Okay, so there's 4 S's. S1 was your administrative, say your adjutant, your personnel, the paper pushers. S2 was your intelligence. So they're the ones who would put together the after action reports. A team comes back and does their brief back and all that. And so the intelligence would put together what we'd call dossiers on a team, like on a AO. So on a specific AO, they might have information. Okay, there's known to be a very large, maybe a regimental base area. There may be a truck park, whatever. So that was an S2. An S3 was operations. S3 is the ones who planned the missions and followed through to make sure they got all the right support, the right team to do that mission and all that. And then S4, and S4 was supply. So they were responsible for equipment and supplies, whether it be your C rations or MREs or ammo or weapons or whatever. That was S4. That was pretty quick.
Yeah, very quick. Let me see. We've already got some new comments. Let's see. A week would, yeah, we could spend a week on that. And he said, yeah, that would be great to have y'all for a week. Let's see.
I'm retired. I ain't got nothing else to do.
I see people also just one two big ones. One would be TDY. Would you like to explain what TDY?
Okay. TDY means temporary duty. As it relates to SOG, the main example of TDY would be the snakebite teams that came over from Okinawa for like a 6-month tour. TDY was always considered, what's the right term? Gravy train, because when you go TDY, there's usually extra money involved. And, and usually TDY was some pretty good duty. I don't know that coming from Okinawa to SOG would be considered pretty good duty, but that was TDY. It was just temporary duty is all it meant. And that's the, I can't speak to NKP over in Thailand, whether guys went from like Okinawa to NKP or not, but in Vietnam, they'd come from Okinawa to SOG on shorter tours, like 6 months.
Yep. Mr. Tony Love was one of the TDY snakebite guys first. Yep. Yep. Also, while we're speaking a little bit of SOG stuff, before some questions start coming in, one thing I want to go into is people should know this, but prairie fire. Would you mind letting us know what prairie fire is?
Okay, so depending on whether you're at CCS, CCC, or CCN, it was called something different. Down at CCS, I think they called it Daniel Boone, and at CCN they called it nickel steel AOs. Prairie fire, pretty simple term. Prairie fire was only used in a situation where you are a team, you are in imminent danger of being overrun. So if you declare, as the team leader, if you declare a prairie fire emergency, you're telling the FOB or, the people in charge in S3 or whatever, you're telling them that you are in immediate danger of being overrun. So what is that really, what happens then? Well, that leads into the aircraft, but I'm only going to touch on the part that applies to a prairie fire. So 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, there was a C-130 flying around up there, and it was commanded by a general. I don't know what level of general, could have been a 1-star, I don't know. But during the daytime, he was called Hillsborough. I'm sorry. Yeah, Hillsborough. And then at night, he was called Moonbeam. This general, if you've got a team declaring a prairie fire emergency, and they're monitoring the whole time, they've got all this communications equipment like you wouldn't believe. How do I know that? That's another story. Yeah, I got a 45 in my face because I almost pulled the curtain back. But that's another story. This general had the authority, based upon the situation, he could divert any and all aircraft anywhere in Southeast Asia to support you, because they were going to do anything within their power to keep a team from being overrun. Obviously, we don't want to lose our guys. So this Hillsborough or Moonbeam, and usually your firefights are during the daytime, so it would be Hillsborough. But yeah, I mean, they convert, and some of the books you read, you talk about 10 flights of aircraft stacked up waiting their turn to go in, and I think in Dick Thompson's latest book, I think he talks about that there was like 10 flights of aircraft stacked up. So that's a prairie fire. And a prairie fire can go on all day, Oh
yeah, hours. I mean, literally all day. And another thing that people get confused about, and we'll see where you'd like to go after this, but I'd like to, you kind of went into it, but I'd like to differentiate the AOs for folks. Originally, what we had was, well, not originally, I'll just go through them. Nickel Steel is the code name for DMZ, aka North Vietnam missions. Okay.
Correct. Right.
And then Shining Brass was the Laotian AO until 1967, when that was kind of it kind of got heat on it and was switched to Prairie Fire AO. So you had the Prairie Fire Emergency and Prairie Fire AO for the Laotian AO. And after down south at CCS, you had your Salem House, which
became Daniel Boone.
Which Daniel Boone code name in 1969 it replaced Daniel Boone in 69 as Salem House, correct, for Cambodia. So I just wanted to let people know about the different AOs right there. Also, would you since I've got it right here with me, people are also wondering about the FOBs. Would you like to speak about the FOBs or me go through with you?
And up north, they had all these FOBs or whatever. You had Fubai, Mylock, Quezon, and what was called FOB4, which was what I call the main CCN headquarters at Da Nang. In the middle area, right at the tri-border of Laos, Cambodia, and South Vietnam, we had CCC, and that's all we had was CCC. Down south, originally, those missions were run by, was it B-56 or B-53? One of them B-50 somethings. And then it became CCS. So when I got there at the beginning of October of '68, it was, all I was aware of was at Da Nang, it was CCN FOB4. Then Kontum, CCC, was called CCN FOB2. And then I wasn't even aware of CCS at the time, so I'm not sure how they designated it.
Yes, sir. What we've got here, as everyone will know, FOB or FOB, whichever generation you come from, Vietnam men refer to it as an FOB. But forward operating base, a permanent SOG camp that housed and trained SF and MERC troops. We've got here, which is very confusing, which it'll take me a minute, but bear with me and you'll see why it's so confusing. FOB1 located at the original FOB at Cam Duck from 1965 until mid 1966. Then Quezon became FOB1 in 1966. Then again, it went to Fubai from 66 until it closed in 68 and was consolidated to CCN. FOB2, located at Kontum from 66 into 70, became known as CCC October of 68. FOB3, located at Quezon from 66 to June 30, 68, and at Mylock from July 1st to November of 68 before shutdown. All of those consolidated. Well, FOB4, located at Marble Mountain, Da Nang from November 67 to November 68. All of those consolidated into CCN. And then you've got FOB5, located at Bami Tui from 67 to November of 68, became CCS in October of 1968. And then FOB6, located at Ho Nok To from 67 to November 68, and that place was completely done away with, and Bami Tui became CCS.
Yeah, I never heard of FOB6, but that's because I was at Kontum,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
there are very few instances. John Stryker Meyer has the unique opportunity of being one of the few CCN Recon teams to actually run Recon down south out of Ho Nok To before they ended up shutting down. So just a little interesting tidbit. But okay. Where do you think, Mr. Terry, after all the people you've seen and spoken to and all that, what do you think we need to cover a little bit for people?
I'm getting worried that we're putting everybody to sleep because I'm not seeing a bunch of questions.
Like Jason said, people are just interested in hearing you and hearing it go.
Yeah, but we could go on for, like I said, we could go on for weeks. So we tried to come up with an outline. Why don't we just go down the outline of what we seem to be the main areas of questions?
Yeah, and then we can do finish up with you asking about what they'd like to see. So
yeah,
we've got some viewers in. Okay, how about most people should know this, but just for the record, what would be the Eldest Son project?
Okay, and I'm gonna read you the because when we talk about eldest son, we need to also talk about you've got eldest son, you've got pole bean,
Italian green.
Yeah. So the definition of eldest son is emplacement of defective or contaminated and exploding mortar shells and other types. And then it refers to pole bean. Basically, the idea was to try to make the NVA fear their own weapons. So you had eldest son. They would doctor, and this was back on Okinawa. There was a group called CCC, Counterinsurgency Organization or whatever. Yeah, it was a Ben Baker was the head of it, and this guy was like the James Bond version of Q. Yes.
Yeah.
And he's the one that came up with the SOG knife, all kinds of different stuff. So they would modify mortar rounds and replace the powder with explosives. So you drop the mortar round down the tube, and instead of shooting the round out the tube blows up and kills whoever's right there around them. Then in conjunction with that, you had, let's see, Italian green. Well, we had...
You also had AK-47s that would literally blow the receiver back into the face or the head. I mean, it was a variety of doctored.
I don't even see Italian green and pole bean on the on our list. But yeah, basically, they were modifying over in Okinawa what we would do with, and the best of my memory is pole bean was the AK rounds. Let's see. Yeah, I don't see it on any of our lists. We tried to print these lists out just to make it easy because, you know, my memory after all these years. So the AK rounds, you know, obviously they pull the bullet, they replace the powder with explosives, put the bullet back in. And then what we would do is we would leave them like, say we set up for the night and maybe we have a firefight or something. When we would leave that area, you know that the NVA are going to come in and they're going to look for whatever they can scrounge up. And we would have like little, like 10 rounds wrapped in a piece of cloth that looked like part of an NVA uniform or something. And we would just scatter some of them around, hoping that the NVA would pick them up. And then the next time they go to use them, boom, the gun blows up in their face and kills them. And the whole idea was just to scare them, make them be afraid of their own weapons. And how successful it was, I've read some reports that interviews with former NVA who said that they were terrified of their own equipment because they never knew if it was going to blow up on them or not.
I can imagine seeing that a few times, either from the mortar or the AK. I can imagine that would strike some fear into the guys that at least were around to see that happen.
Another thing, and I've never in any of the books, I've never heard anybody, well, I've heard one mention just real briefly, something else that we used that was probably more effective than, you know, this stuff, doctored ammo, is we would leave behind these little transistor. It looked like a transistor radio. They were real small. And that radio only played one station, and it was a propaganda station to try to get them to, the term was chew-hoy, you know, I'm going to come over to your side, I give up. And while they're listening to that, it's transmitting a signal. All of a sudden, out of the heavens comes a B-52 that they don't even hear until the bombs start hitting. So that was another way of killing a bunch of bad guys with none of our guys getting hurt. You leave the radio behind. These guys are far from home. They don't know when they're ever going to go home. So you got a radio station, and even if it's a Chew Hoy station, they're going to listen to it because it's something to listen to. And they don't realize that they're sending a signal up probably to Hillsborough or Moonbeam, who's then relaying, okay, we got a signal right here. We got troops here. And then whatever kind of aircraft would come and bomb the hell out of them.
Yeah, absolutely. That I enjoyed seeing about that. Somebody had actually just posted a little bit about the radios and how effective they are. And you're right. Except for Plaster, I don't think I've seen many authors speak about the radios and how effective they were.
So I don't know how widespread they were used. I know that in Hatchet Force, frequently we carried them.
Wow. And y'all just dump them out and leave them. You didn't have to set them up in a specific area.
No, you just leave them where you were set up because you know that they're going to swarm in after we're gone and see what they can come up with. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Let's see here. We had a few more. I mean, I guess the guys know by now, we had talked about locations like NKP. People ask about that. Nakhon Phanom, the Royal Thai Air Base where people launched out of. You also had the heavy hook there to where they would rescue and coveys would fly out of occasionally, as well as Pleiku. Did you have anything else? I think we decided on Ben Tram. We had been asked about a Ben Tram before.
Okay, Ben Tram was the North Vietnamese designation for the unit that was responsible for maintaining the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So you had Ben Trams, like, say, I don't know what their designations, like, say, Ben Tram 1, Ben Tram 2, kind of like our FOBs, but they were like a regional, they had a responsibility for a certain portion of the trail. And their whole job was to keep the vehicles moving, to keep them refueled, to keep supplies loaded on the trucks, and keep things moving down the trail. So they had a variety of different functions, but it was all geared towards keeping things moving down the trail.
Let's see. Jason was wanting to ask about the RDF capabilities and define it.
Oh, the radio directional finding. They were really good at that. I mean, you know, we talk about the NVA, and I think the perception is that they were less than good, and that's really not true. These guys were, a lot of them were very well trained, and this radio directional finding, they could have two different groups with radios, and they would listen for our transmissions, and basically it's what you call triangulation, and they could combine these two radios directionally, and they could pinpoint where we were at. And that was very common from what we've learned over the years.
And they seem to be damn good at it too.
Yep.
I mean, they get on y'all pretty damn quick.
And I've never seen anything that I can say that this was actually the case, but it would not surprise me if they had very qualified, maybe Russian or some other foreign country advisors that were working with them on this RDF to teach them how to easily and quickly, because usually our radio transmissions were not very long. They were very quick, short, and to the point, because we knew that they were trying to triangulate us every time you talked. So you wanted to be quick, but I believe personally that there was probably a lot of foreign help with that piece of what they were doing.
Absolutely, absolutely. They were being trained by either the Cubans or the Russians on that, for sure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna run through the projects because I get a lot of questions on them. It's very quick and to the point. You've got Project Delta, which was the SF Recon unit that Charlie Beckwith ran, 5th Special Forces Group, but they operated in South Vietnam as opposed to SOG going outside the borders. Project Omega, which was the initial code name for the Recon unit into northern Cambodia, which later became CCC. Then Sigma, Project Sigma, was the group that went into southern Cambodia, which later became CCS. I've been asked about a lot about those, so I just wanted to cover that while I could. I think we were also going to cover the yards who worked with y'all, the SCU, better known as the Sioux.
So if you see pictures of SOG guys back in camp, obviously not on a mission, and you'll see on their left chest pocket, you see this shield-shaped thing with it's red, white, and a few other colors, like a tiger jumping through, that was called the Sioux pad. We called it Sioux, SCU, and all it stood for was, it was just a term for the yards, so you didn't call them mercenaries, and a special commando unit. That's what it stood for. So we called them Sioux. When we were out in the field, on a mission, we called them soap bubbles. I don't know where that came from, but the Americans were straw hats and the yards were soap bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
That's one that I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because a lot of people don't notice that, and it's in one really famous Prairie Fire radio that's actually radio transmission that's been released, and folks are always asking what in the heck is a soap bubble and straw hat. So I'm really glad you actually mentioned that.
And along with soap bubbles and straw hats, you've got Whiskey India Alpha, WIA, mm-hmm. Kilo India, killed in action. So like say you have a firefight and you might call in 2 straw hats, Whiskey India Alpha, 2 wounded Americans, 3 soap bubbles, Whiskey India Alpha or KIA. So straw hats and soap bubbles was the distinction between the Americans, and whether it was yards, Nungs, Cambods, whatever, your mm-hmm. indigenous team members.
Mm-hmm. And I'm glad you actually just mentioned the Nungs. A lot of guys don't know the Nungs were the early SOG indigenous guys, brave, hard as nails. It actually got to where they had died off so much. They did have Nung teams later on, but most of them had earned their right to be guards and run bodyguard duty, because they put up a hell of a fight in the early days of SOG, and they were actually South Vietnamese tribesmen of Chinese origin, very renowned for their fighting qualities and dedication to Army Special Forces, employed as mercenaries by SOG recon teams.
And my understanding is, because I never worked with the Nungs, my understanding is that the Nungs were primarily up north at CCN.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I don't. As a matter of fact, I don't know that I've ever seen Hatchet Force or Recon otherwise mention having a Nung on their team at all. I believe that's all northern.
And I think geographically, the reason for that is that they came originally from China, and as they came down, they settled in the northern part of South Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why.
Absolutely. And all those early FOBs were right there in that area. So they were just swept up by them. So I noticed a good one. We're almost at an hour and a half, and I don't know how well you're doing. And we've got 2 questions, but after
as
this,
as long as my bladder holds out, we're okay.
We can always cover a few more. I've got some on the list, but I thought one that would be good for you to cover, and damn, I just went blank on it. Let me find it where it was. People always get mixed up. Outpost Leghorn and Outpost Hickory.
Okay. I'm going to say 10 miles. I may be off a little bit from our launch site at Dak To. Was a radio relay site that was set up in, it was either 66 or 67 by Lieutenant George Sizzler, who later earned the Medal of Honor. It was a radio relay site on a mountaintop in Laos that was so high up. And unfortunately, I've got a ton of pictures of it. Unfortunately, because Bud's having to use his cell phone right now, we can't post those pictures, but we will later. It was so high up that the only way to get to it supposedly was by chopper. I've read some stories of recon teams being put in on Leghorn and they walked down off the mountain. I don't know how the hell they got down, because if you saw the pictures, you'd see just how steep it was. And then Hickory was the other radio relay site that served CCN, so it was further north. Never been there.
It was by Quezon.
Yeah. It was overrun later on. Also, and I've read it, I can't remember whose book it was, but I read a reference that at Leghorn that there was a bunch of NSA monitoring equipment. I spent a whole month up there. I was never aware of any NSA monitoring equipment. So I don't know when it was put there, if it was. Again, I can't say that it wasn't, because, you know, I'd only been to Leghorn a couple of times. But supposedly there was NSA equipment up there also. What they were monitoring, probably radio traffic, but NVA radio traffic, I would imagine. But I don't know.
I'd heard from a few of the guys that were up there for a short amount of time saying the times they were up there, they ran into ASA spooks up there that were in civilian clothes and the whole nine.
Well, I would think after spending a whole month up there, I would have run into them at least once. You know.
Yeah, evidently they were on their off time while you were up there.
I guess they didn't want to be with me.
Let's see here. And one thing before we get into some of these questions that some of the guys have answered, the one thing that is was confusing to me, and it might be confusing to other guys that are going between CCN and CCS and CCC and hearing about the Hatchet forces, and then earlier they were known as Hornet forces. But one interesting thing, there's exploitation forces, which were at CCS, and Hatchet forces were CCC. Each CNC detachment had 2 exploitation companies. At CCC and CCN, early B-50 and B-56 units were called Hatchet forces. They provided platoon-sized units at the forward launch sites, the MLSs, and they were on standby to help with rescue missions when recon teams got into trouble early on. Later, the exploit companies also aggressively patrolled local areas around CCS and BMT, BAMI, TUI, to prevent attacks by the VC or NVA. So there's a split in names, but they are the same thing. Exploitation forces are CCS, Hatchet forces are CCC and CCN, just for the record.
Okay. Let's talk about aircraft, because those questions come up all the time about the terminology for the aircraft. So we'll start with the choppers. So you had H-34s, or the King Bees, which were flown by Vietnamese pilots. These were old Korean War vintage
piston-driven
H-34s. We loved them, called the King Bees. Those King Bee pilots were fearless. They'd fly anywhere. Then you had, in the Huey line, you had the you got a dog laying here snoring. You had the
UH-1, the Huey.
The UH-1s were your troop carrying helicopters. So basically, they had an M60 mounted on each side, and that was it for armament, because they were troop transports. Then you had the Charlie model gunships, UH-1Cs, and the Charlie models had rocket pods on both sides, and generally they'd have miniguns and rocket pods. Then you had the Cobras, which was that was your heavy firepower, was the Cobras. They had a minigun in the turret. They had rocket pods on both sides, and they had a pilot and a co-pilot that sat one behind the other. I've been asked about, well, like, what about the Jolly Green Giants and these other types of choppers? The only time I ever flew in a Jolly Green was on a SLAM mission where, the whole company was going in and on a hilltop to block the trail.
Before we go any further, go ahead and elaborate on what a SLAM is.
Okay. SLAM was, again, a bunch of letters that stood for, in the Army's terminology, it stood for search, locate, annihilate, and monitor. We changed the M to be mutilate, just because we're young and stupid, being ignorant. But a couple of times a year, they'd run a SLAM mission. And for instance, a SLAM mission, like one I remember in January of 1970, it was decided we're gonna block the Ho Chi Minh Trail and just keep anybody from coming down the trail, even though the trail was really a series of roads. The main highway 19 coming down. So there were two hilltops, one on each side of this Highway 19. And we came in, Company A of the Hatchet Force went on one hilltop, Company B went on the other hilltop, and we jammed the road up for a week. Sometime later, I read an article that was in the Miami Herald newspaper. And this was like 2 years after the fact, but it was because somebody ran their mouth. And I could tell by the description of this mission that it was this SLAM mission. And supposedly we meaning mainly the Air Force, was credited with killing over 5,000 NVA because the convoys were just blocked up for miles on the trail. And, the planes would just run up and down the trail, bombing the hell out of these trucks. I don't know where they come up with 5,000, Maybe it was, I think they were estimating, okay, we blew up X number of trucks, probably this many guys on each truck. I don't know. But that would be a typical SLAM mission. And another one could be, well, we're going to put the company into a regimental base camp area, and you're going to have all the air support in the world and blah, 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 you know. So SLAM missions were kind of like the, that was going big time.
Blowing everything up you possibly could.
Yeah, it wasn't a routine, well, we think there's a truck park, we'll send you in to try to find it and blow shit up. This was big time stuff. So that was a SLAM mission. And like I say, there were several of them a year.
Wow. And there were some big ones. Yeah. I mean, Bob Howard on some, Tom Wascovich up there on Nightcap. There were some big ones.
And sometimes they were a mixture of both Recon teams and Hatchet Force. The Recon team would go in and locate what the mission was supposed to be for, and then they would pull back, and then the Hatchet Force would do their thing. But there was always major air power involved. It was not just a routine 2 Charlie model gunships and 2 Cobras.
I mean, since we're talking big aircraft, we might as well go ahead and bring up. We've got 3 of them. I'll let you pick which ones you want to describe first. You've got your.
Well, we talked about all the choppers, so we got that out of the way. If I had to pick one aircraft to support me on a mission, it would be the A1s. The A1s were piston-driven, single-engine, again, Korean War vintage aircraft. There were different models of the A1. There was the A1C, the A1E, whatever. One model, you had 2 guys in it, pilot and co-pilot. Most of the ones that I saw were just a single pilot. What was so great about an old piston-driven plane? A couple of things. Number one, those pilots were badass dudes, man. But the amount of firepower that they had was awesome. But also the big thing that made them so attractive is they could get to our AO and they could hang around for about 4 hours before, because of fuel, they had to turn around and come back. Now, it was probably different up at CCN, but at CCC, because we're kind of like in the middle of the country, more or less, a fast mover, like, I don't know all the terms on F4s, F100s, whatever. If they were going to come in and support us, like you had a prairie fire emergency, they might. The problem was, from a fuel perspective, they just barely had enough fuel to get to us, drop their shit, and be gone, so they didn't run out of fuel. And that's where the A1s just stood out. I mean, 4 hours on station.
They kind of sound like the and you know they wanted to get rid of them back then, and now with the A10s they're wanting to get rid of them. They sound like the old real first version of an A10, just up there just destroying people at close combat.
Right. And you know, the A1, they could carry a load of armament. Number one, they had miniguns. Number two, some of them even later on had the 40 millimeter grenade launchers. They had rocket pods, so they could fire HE. They could fire white phosphorus,
cluster bombs.
Well, and then they had the big pods full of cluster bombs. They might have 200 or 500-pound bombs. They just carried so much armament. I saw a picture on one of these Facebook groups where they had an A1 and they had all the armament that an A1 could carry laid out in front of it.
Oh, that's the one I posted when I was reading the Sky Raider book by George Merritt.
And oh my God, when you look at the amount of firepower that one of those, what we would call an old plane, could carry, it was just incredible.
I mean, like you said, to put it in perspective, guys, I mean, I remember you telling me, I know, I'm almost positive the first time we spoke about A1Es and how badass they were. You were saying that they'd come in so low. Not only could you see the pilot and wave at you, but when he'd come on with the miniguns, hot brass would be falling right on top of y'all. He was
Yeah, we would get showered. If you're in a situation where, so we got a company in there. If we got a company, they've probably got a battalion or a regiment against us, like 1,000 or 2,000 guys, because they know we're a lot of people. These A1s, when they're coming at you, and one of the shows that we want to do, I want to do especially, is have me from the Hatchet Force on the ground perspective and a pilot, and Bud's working on getting that set up now.
It's set up. It's set up. We're good to go on it.
Good. To talk about the different perspective of what we see on the ground and what those A1 pilots see from the air. So these guys come in on a strafing run with their minigun, and those miniguns were capable of 6,000 rounds a minute. They could put a bullet in every square foot of
a football
field, just like that. So these guys come in at literally treetop level. They're risking getting shot down because they're so damn low. And they fly over you, and I guess one hand is on the stick and pushing the machine gun button, and the other is waving at you as they go by. And that was, I'm not going to say it was rare, but it was not real common, but it happened a number of times. And I mean, that's just how badass those guys were, and fearless. And the variety of armament they carried, I mean, they might be carrying napalm, and there was I don't think there was really at least I wasn't privy to it, but when they launched in the morning, was there some kind of plan that, okay, we're going to have two of them that are going to go heavy on bombs and maybe CBUs, another one's going to go heavy with napalm? I don't know if it was a planned thing or if they randomly did it.
I think, according to Mr. George Merritt, if they got enough info on what the team or where the team was at, and if they had time, they would custom outfit before flying out. And I also found out he also was one of the first men to actually shoot nails from a Sky Raider.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow. Usually they're on the choppers, but he actually got a nail rocket, and he actually got it to use.
Well, when Bud gets his new internet set up and that where we can have the pictures again, I'm gonna give him a picture. I was fortunate enough to pick it up from one of our crew chiefs who passed away, and his sons donated a rocket full of those, what Bud's calling nails. They were called flechette rounds. Mm-hmm. And it's a cutaway. This guy spent years making it. It's a cutaway of a 2.75-inch rocket with full of flechette rounds. And I've got pictures of that. And it was donated to the Special Operations Association. Unfortunately, the only time it'll ever be seen is if you go to Vegas in October to the Special Operations reunion. and it'll be out on a table. I know, but it'll give you an idea. I forget how many thousands of these little steel darts.
2,200.
2,200 in one rocket, and they'd have a whole bank of those rockets. And the flechette rounds, and I saw them used up close, and let me tell you, there ain't a leaf left on a tree where those flechette rounds go, and it's really something to see a guy literally nailed to a tree. I mean,
I remember you telling me that story. He was literally nailed to a tree.
The closest I can come to describing what people might be able to relate to is a shotgun shell. You know, when you fire it, you got all these little lead pellets, and they go out like that and take down everything that's in their way. Well, the flechette round was the same way. And eventually we got flechette rounds for the M79.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, baby. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the A1s, and there was different designations like A1C, A1E, whatever, but they were A1s and A1. Then you had your F4s, your F100s. I saw them in use.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Just a couple of times, really, because of the distance.
Considering before we decide on what we're going to ask the viewers what they'd like to see, something that you had more direct contact with would be, you know, the 01 Bird Dogs, the 02 Skymasters, we covered the Spads, but you were definitely seeing the OV-10 Broncos and the Bird Dogs a lot more, and Spooky and Spectre.
The OV-10 Bronco, it was a weird plane for its time. It had a propeller in front and a propeller in the back. I guess fortunate's the right word. I was fortunate enough to get to fly one of them. When I got the shot the first time and they sent me to Japan when it was time to get out of the hospital, I got a flight back to Cam Bay. They tried to assign me to some leg unit because they had a shortage of people, and it's like, no, that ain't going to happen. So I just hopped on one of our Blackbirds and flew it in the Trang, and I told the Sergeant Major what I did. And he's like, oh, shit, not another one. And he took care of it and got orders recut, you know, reassigning me back to CCC. But this is what happens when you get old and senile. Where was I going with this?
We were talking about Spectre and Spooky.
Okay. So I was going somewhere else with it, but okay. Spectre,
you got on the Blackbird. You got on the Blackbird, and you were at a truck heading back to base.
Right. So anyway, I forgot where I was going eventually with it. But anyway, Spectre and Spooky and all that, you had different gunships. When I say gunships, I mean airplanes. For instance, Spectre was a C-130 that was very heavily armed. So was Spooky. Originally, Spookies were C-47s, and then later I don't know. To me, Spectre and Spooky was about the same thing. I know that Spectre at night had the ability to drop flares to light things up. Spooky was strictly a gunship. It had miniguns mounted on one side of the plane, and I don't know if there was two or three.
There was two originally.
When they fired, and this goes back to my time on Leghorn, looking over towards what they called the Bra area, which is a couple of bends in the river that shape of a bra. that was a real heavily traveled by the NBA trail going across the river there. And that was close to Hotel 9. When you see that spooky firing both guns at the same time, 6,000 rounds a minute out of each gun, all you see is a bunch of red lines coming down, and it fills the sky with all those red lines. I mean, that's how bad it. Every fifth round is a tracer, and if you're seeing a long red line, that's how fast those bullets are coming out.
Puff the Magic Dragon, how it got its name.
Again, Puff the Magic Dragon, spit and fire. Those, you know. So we had all these different names of planes,
we're actually gonna have a modern day AC-130 gunship pilot, but he wrote the history of the Vietnam era guys, and we're gonna be having him on.
Ooh.
And it's going to be very interesting, and he's got a lot of stories and a lot of photos from the guys helping you guys out. And those early ones, they had a rough time, but when they finally got not only the 7.62 minigun in, they got 40 millimeters in there, and then they finally talked the Air Force general into putting a 105, I believe.
Yes.
And once they got that in there, boy, they were like, all right, y'all boys just start running loose on them.
Can you imagine being the pilot of a C-130 and you've got a 105? I mean, all you got to do is look at the size of that round and think, okay, when that thing fires, how does it not knock that aircraft out of the sky just from the recoil? I don't know.
It's the videos of them shooting that, and I'll be glad, and I hope you get to watch live, because he's got a lot of videos and a lot of photos. It is absolutely amazing to see them in action, and they had even later in the war during Vietnam, they had started getting computers and computer targeting systems, and they would just catch those trucks and wipe out 50, 60 trucks on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and just leave a burning jungle in its wake. Just madness.
So I'll tell a little story of mine about the C-130 spooky gunship, about how accurate they were. So I was on a mission, and of course we were in deep crap, which is normal. And I happened to be with a captain who had a lot of confidence in me working airstrikes. And so he let me work the airstrikes. And I wanted to work, we had a spooky gunship, and I wanted to work that thing in danger close, because they were danger close. See, the North Vietnamese figured out, and it didn't take them, I don't think, a long time to figure it out, that our pilots generally were not going to fire danger close. They were not going to drop ordnance, not on top of us, but right up on us. So they knew that if they could get between where the bombs were dropping or the airstrikes or whatever and us, they would be safe, and they'd have a better chance of overrunning us. Well, it was nighttime, and again, I wish we had the pictures, but if you look on my gear, on my upper right shoulder, most of us is where we carried our strobe lights. And the strobe light was in this little nylon pouch that snapped shut at the top. Well, you unsnap that and push the button for the strobe light, and because that nylon came up beyond the top of the strobe light, it guided the strobe light straight up in the air. So we all had our strobe lights on, so now we've clearly delineated our perimeter. So I called up to the spooky and I said, okay, we've got our strobes. Do you see the strobes? Yes, I see the strobes. put it in danger close. Well, none of them pilots, and I understand it, they were real leery about danger close because they didn't want to have friendly fire casualties. It's like, they're right up on top of us. You need to be danger close. Okay. So they did danger close and took care of business. After I got back from Vietnam the last time, I was with a couple of my buddies and we were talking, and they knew I was in Special Forces, but of course I couldn't talk about SOG. And the one brother, the older of the two brothers, had been in the Air Force. I knew that. And I said, "What did you do?" And he said, "I was a gunner on a spooky gunship." And he says, "I swear I talked to you on the radio one time." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And he says, "Well, apparently there was a team that was somewhere they weren't supposed to be, and they were in danger of being overrun. And this guy was just as cool as could be, and he was telling us danger close, and they all had their strobe lights on and blah, blah, blah." And the more he told the story, it's like, God, what a small world. That was me that you were talking to. And it what are the odds, and but my point is, they were so accurate that they were able to put bullets up within about 15 feet of our perimeter, just working off of our strobe lights. And they're in a moving airplane, and they're still able to be that accurate. It's just incredible.
I really hope you get to watch
I will.
that episode. It's really gonna because I may have to split it up into two parts because the books are each 300 pages. And
Lord.
I might have to get him to split it up and do Vietnam and then do his personal service, which was the second book, because it is just, you'll gain a whole new respect for even the high flying air crews, because they were just laying siege to guys. I mean, well, we've gotten to the last of the questions. I'm not sure if you had any more names or anything you'd like to lay out before we ask what the guys or viewers would like to look forward to.
So is nobody asked?
Last question.
Okay.
We do have one more question, actually.
Support of the conventional forces invasion of Laos or Cambodia or any other ops in support. To my knowledge, the answer is no. Now I know that further north, what was it called, Bud? Lamson 719. Yes, I know that CCN sent some teams in ahead of them. I'm not aware of any CCC operations that supported those missions, and I'm not sure about CCS. Well, I think CCS did. Didn't they, when they went into Cambodia? I think CCS did.
They did do some early recon for CC.
Yeah. But I'm not aware of CCC doing anything, because in our AO there was no conventional invasion. It was further north and further south. When you remember, how much time did you know about some of the other SOG projects? That's an easy answer. Nothing.
Compartmentalization.
And I think to make my point is something Bud and I talked about the other day. One of my good friends that I went through training group with, and we went over there, we were both at CCC, and in a year and a half, the only time when I had been there 14 months, when I saw him get off a chopper, and it was the mission when Doug Miller got the Medal of Honor, we were doing the roadblock, and they landed their team inside our perimeter, and they walked down off the hill, so the NVA wouldn't say, "Oh, a chopper landed over here, let's go get them." I saw Glenn Yamura I had not seen him in all that time. And just within our camp at CCC, that's how compartmentalized a lot of the stuff was. We had our area where the Hatchet Force was. The Recon teams had their area where they lived. They trained separately from us. Everything was, so there was a couple of guys. Another one was my buddy David Gilmer.
Mm-hmm.
He was there. I didn't know he was there. Hell, he just lived right down the road, once we moved down to the FOB. But that's how compartmentalized we were. So anything you knew about other operations was generally by rumor or sitting in the club and you'd hear guys talking. And there wasn't a whole lot of interaction between the Hatchet Force and the Recon teams. It was one of them things,
Yeah, that's what really shocked me is because you were in a group, and I've got those and I'll share them. And I'm sure the next time we might devote a little bit more time to what it was like in training group with all of these future SOG men, Glenn Umera, Bob Bechtold, God, I'm blanking on the two other men that were with you, Gilmer, several others that are just amazing Recon men and Hatchet Forces in their own right. But I was so surprised that there y'all are all at the same compound, same time, and very, very little interaction unless you happen to cross paths, like you said, at the bar or on the compound. Just it's wild.
Yeah.
Just wild.
We were all in our own little worlds.
Yeah. Yeah. Little 3 feet worlds that keeps things safe. Exactly.
I saw another question pop up and then it went away. Did they ever try advanced leadership courses? No. Nope. Hatchet Force was like the redheaded stepchild. Kind of like being a Marine, you were a redheaded stepchild of the Navy. Well, Hatchet Force was a redheaded stepchild of SOG. Everything seemed like everything revolved around the Recon teams.
And I ought to say another thing before you finish up that most of the guys were already, for instance, Captain McCarley accomplished 1-0, who had been to 1-0 school and all that. So I'm sure they thought that just by having, those guys there and training and all that was more or less them getting to learn Recon like stuff from former 1-0s, which I don't really agree with, although you're learning from great men. But I would have liked to have seen the Hatchet Forces do something, a team leadership building course like the Recon guys had, but that's neither here nor there.
Everything we learned in Hatchet Force, we learned, unless you had prior experience over there, we learned either through training or on the job training, in the middle of a firefight.
And that's, one could argue that's the best training and probably some of the scariest is that OJT, getting it right there, live or die, get it right or it's over with.
I guess we're at a point, it's been 2 hours and have the questions all died off?
We might have one more. Yep, they're just saying, hey, and I was asking what they'd like to see, but I'll let you go ahead and ask what they might like to look forward to besides all the guests we've got planned and your double appearances and such coming.
I've got a couple of ideas, and it's kind of hard trying to gauge the interest, but like I said earlier, my big idea was to have, and it wouldn't matter really whether it's me or somebody else, me and a pilot, no matter whether it's a chopper pilot or a A1 pilot, talking about the differences in perception of what the guy on the ground sees and what the guy in the air sees. Because you got to remember, we're trying to talk from the ground. We're generally talking to Covey, and then Covey is talking to the aircraft. Now, the aircraft could hear us talking also if we're on the same frequency, but a lot of times Covey had talked to us on one frequency and then on the other radio, it's on the aircraft frequency. So a lot of times the aircraft couldn't hear us talking.
I believe I talked to Don yesterday finally, and he is all on board once the computer's it. So, and he said he'd be more than happy, considering I haven't spoke to Ed and John Blah, but he said he'd be more than happy to sit with you and reunite with RT New York, since he saved their bacon. So,
and one of the neat things with Don Fulton and I is we were both there at the same time. So I can guarantee you that Fulton flew for missions that I was on, which I think it'll be interesting, if there's enough interest.
It's not been done, so it will be interesting.
Another one that we've tossed around was having one of the guys from Hatchet Force at CCN, me from CCC, and maybe even a third guy like Tony Love or somebody from CCS, having us all on together talking about all the differences, whether it's the differences in terrain, the differences in air support, the difference in the type of troops that we encountered, all those kind of things. So that's another idea we've tossed around. But we're open for suggestions on. We're trying to make it things that are going to be interesting to the greatest number of people that are listening. Yeah. So if anybody's,
I think the you with Don Fulton, it's never been done. That's going to be amazing. And then either you with Mr. Vern Ward or my new contact, Mr. John Bartlett from CCN Hatchet Forces. I think either all of those, doing them all at some point in time, but even doing one, those two ideas are going to be, I think, very, very interesting, considering they've not been done before.
Yeah.
So we can.
This would be a good point for people that are listening. If you've got a suggestion or an idea, type it in.
Yeah, I'm waiting, and guys that view it later on, if no one pops in right now, y'all message me or leave comments, viewers on the page, and let me know. Let's see here. All of those sound phenomenal. Yeah. See, so everyone's on board with that. I'm sure people that after they watch this, they'll start throwing in some more ideas once they get a little bit of time to think about it. But I think that those ideas are going to be perfect. We've got a lot of stuff. Once I get this computer fixed, it's going to be a whole new ball game.
I know Jason has about 15 million followers on his TwitBrain account, whatever that's called. I don't do that stuff. Facebook's bad enough. But we've had a lot of conversations off the air about what kind of subjects are going to get the most amount of interest, so the greatest number of people, and depending on the subject, it generates So, Lee Mean, one of the discussions we've had, and I've shared a couple of stories with Bud, but unfortunately, there's some stories that are never going to get shared in a forum like this, just because, do we really want to...
Raunchy. A little raunchy.
Do we really want to spend a bunch of time me telling the story about how I got arrested for running 2 truckloads of whores to a party after curfew? It's a funny story and all that, but can you imagine having me and Tony Love on together telling
what an episode?
Because there's a ton of stories that could be told that are the humor side of it, not blood and guts stuff. Because after a while, you tell the blood and guts stories; they all kind of run together, in my mind, anyway.
I think I'm writing you and Tony down, and I know Tony would be fully on board, and I'll message him today. I think that would be a very, very fun episode to have you and Tony on.
But again, I think I've said it 3 or 4 times now. let's try to plan some shows that a lot of people want to hear about. And if Bud and Jason don't get, yeah, you're right, Jason, it would. If we don't get the feedback on what you want to hear, I mean, obviously I could sit here and talk on for days, but at the same time, how much interest is it, you know? So yeah, some of these stories are fun. I mean, Tony and I think we'd break the internet with some of these stories. Some of them would get kind of raunchy, but you got to remember too, again, like I talked about all the drinking to kind of numb your mind from seeing your buddies killed or missing in action. You play hard, you work hard, and you play hard. And that's what we did.
And y'all were kids. I mean, y'all were kids also.
Yeah,
you got to keep that in fact.
I mean, I turned 20 a week before I got there. And so what was I, 21 or 22 when I came home? Yeah, we played hard.
Understatement of a century.
Light brown hair and blue eyes with those Montagnard women. Yes, I
had to beat them off with sticks.
I had a lot of memories, and you know, just a lot of stories. You know, there's a lot of the human side of it. Like, for instance, there was a Montagnard orphanage down in Khartoum. And there was a lot of us. I'm not the only one. But there's a lot of us went down there every month and gave blood, you know, to the orphanage, you know, because we loved our yards. We loved them that much. And if you think about it, you needed to love them because your life depended on them out in the field. And I'll never forget my one interpreter. His family, they lived right outside the gates of the camp. And my girlfriend, her little house that I paid for was right next door to them. So I spent a lot of time down there with his kids, and I've got pictures that I treasure. When he was killed, I was home on leave when he was killed. And so when I got back, I took his wife and some of his family members down to play coup to the hospital to try to find his body so we could bring it back to be buried. And those are the kind of things, the human side of it. And that really tore me up because he and I were really close. And, you know, those kind of things were the heart-wrenching things. There was a mission we could talk about for a long time at the end of October 1969 when there was supposedly a POW camp that held some of our guys and a bunch of pilots. And we put a team in, and it was a setup, of course, and the whole area was surrounded by concrete bunkers and all that shit. And two of the Americans, the captain of the company, and the only reason I wasn't on the mission is because the next day I was leaving to come home on extension leave, and then Ronald Bozikas, and he took a burst, either machine gun or AK, who knows, and was killed. And the day I got home, my mom picked me up at the airport, and she said, "Did you know Ronald Bozikas?" And I was like, "Yes, he was killed a few days ago." She said, "Well, his funeral is this afternoon." So I went to the funeral, and I met his family, and I went over to their house after the funeral, and his dad made an admission for the rest of his life. And it was so simple. All he wanted to do, I say all, it was classified, okay? Well, it turns out that his son was writing letters home, giving him down to the minute details of our missions. And the dad, he was a World War II veteran. He wanted to force the Army to change all his certificates and whatever to say that he was killed in Laos instead of saying he was killed in an enemy-controlled area of Southeast Asia. You know, 1972, I mean, I'd been back from Vietnam for 2 years, and I was a cop, and I'm getting contacted by this reporter trying to do this expose on secret missions in Laos. And because a couple of chopper pilots and a SOG captain who I knew, they spilled the beans.
Van Buskirk.
No, this was a different guy.
Okay.
But I actually went to the field with this guy a couple of times. He was at CCC. I didn't know that he was also from the St. Louis area, but he was. But anyway, you know, there's stories like that unfortunately, this guy's father was just so ate up with forcing the government that he's dragging other people into it. I didn't want any part of it because that stuff's classified. You know, 20 years non-disclosure. You go to Leavenworth if you talk about it. And I don't trust reporters to start with. So, you know, it's like, you know,
thank you.
I might nod my head if you ask me a question, but I'm not getting involved in an expose like that. So there's a lot of stories we could tell. There's other stories that maybe how a guy was killed the truth doesn't match up with the awards or the official stories.
Citation.
And, you know, some of that is to protect the families. I mean, the family doesn't need to know that their son died because of something careless that happened. All they need to know is he was in a combat situation and he died. And leave it at that, because you gotta have, at least I feel like you gotta have some kind of compassion for the families. So there's a lot of stories like that that'll never be told. Vern Ward and I can tell a couple of them. Another is there's rumors. If you guys know about Operation Tailwind, there was, you know, the big CNN bullshit thing about they used sarin gas and all that. There's some stories about green mist. I know of two specifically. Green mist. Well, what the hell was green mist? Well, I know some things about that I'll never talk about, simply because even our own SOG guys would say it never happened. So why even talk about it? Plus, it's stuff that the general public, if what we're doing was classified for 20 years, that right there tells you that there's some things that we did that just don't need to be talked about. Last month, Bud, or month before, on one of the interview things, there was some guy that we believe was from overseas, but he was trying to lead the conversation into a discussion of war crimes. He's gone. He ain't gonna be back. Stuff like that is totally out of place. And obviously, I got no, you know.
No, that's one thing. You'll be booted from this discussion, this group, this page immediately. And I was trying to get Mike Hagan on. Rest in peace. We just lost him, and he was in such bad shape, and he was very disgruntled about what happened about Tailwind and how they lied to him under the auspices they were going to help him with the VA. And yeah, Tailwind has a lot of stories that need to be told. We had Barry Pinchek on, and he told his side. But like you said, there's just some stuff that families and us, the overall public, just don't need to know about.
Exactly. And I think people listening probably figured out by now that I'm not shy about, you know, it doesn't bother me to talk about it, but there's certain things that aren't going to get talked about it. And if somebody tries to push the issue,
you're going
to get shut down. And you got to remember too, all this stuff that we're talking about happened 50 some years ago. And Bud and I were talking yesterday, and I had lunch yesterday with two real close friends. One's a retired sergeant major and one's a retired colonel that were both airborne rangers and all that good stuff, but in more modern times. And they're trying to get me to write a book. And it's like, if you read all these books by a certain category of our guys,
CCN,
I ain't going to go there. But I can't tell a story. Some of the stories, like if I'm telling the story about when I got shot the first time, yes, I know the date, and there's a reason why I know the date that has nothing to do with SOG. But I can't tell you areas. Some of them I can. Dates, times, coordinates, conversations, and all this nonsense. I can't remember all that stuff. And so why write a book? Because a lot of it's going to be from memory, and you can put 5 of us that were on the same mission talking about the same exact mission, and you may get 5 different stories about what went on. And as we get older, some of the guys, and Bud knows who I'm talking about, some of them can be real assholes. I'm not going to mention his name, Bud. But and that's just because with the passage of time, some of this stuff becomes good example. The other night, after Bud and I had talked the first time this week about this show and going over abbreviations and all that, one that I've heard mentioned a few times, I see it in some of the books, and nobody knows what the hell it means, and that's SPAF, S-P-A-F. Well, what does SPAF mean? At Khartoum, we had some of the pilots that flew the Covey missions for us were Air Force pilots, and they lived in barracks at the Khartoum Air Base. So we kind of had our own little nickname for them, and that was SPAFs. Well, what it stood for was Sneaky Pete Air Force. And I'm laying there trying to get to sleep, and my sleeping pill hadn't kicked in yet. And all these abbreviations are going through my head. And I said, what's one that nobody will ever figure out? And SPAF came to mind. And I'm laying there. And I said, what the hell was SPAF anyway? And then finally, I realized Sneaky Pete Air Force. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of acronyms. I mean, that we haven't begun to touch on because there's just not time. But
and y'all were the only ones with y'all's own private Air Force too for a while.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I find it interesting too that like Barry Pensick was a Cobra pilot supporting CCN. All of our in CCN, even though Tailwind was CCC mission. Basically, most of his support was flown in support of CCN missions. At CCC, it was Army and Air Force pilots. Unless, well, even if you had a fast mover come in to support you, that would have been an Air Force pilot.
Wow.
There's a lot of, I guess we could call them regional differences. And that's why we thought, having one of us from each of the 3 CC camps, it'd be interesting to talk about the differences in support from all the different aspects.
We've got a few SPAF gentlemen. As you know, I've had Frank Doherty on his written book, and we've got a few others in the group, and I'm writing his name down now. To see if maybe he'd be interested in talking about SPAF work with working with Coveys and such.
And I'll say this, and it comes from the heart. The pilots that flew for us, whether it was a chopper pilot, an A1 pilot, a Cubby pilot, these guys had balls of steel. And if it were not for all of them combined, there'd be a whole lot less of us here today to even talk about this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and I think, just like even me sitting here talking, I think the pilots tend to get, what's the term? Short shifted. I don't think they get enough credit for what they did for us. You know, and I just really believe that the more credit, they deserve every bit of what credit they do get, because they earned it. They earned it too. You read some of the stories about these pilots, and Bud will know what I'm talking about. It's something we can't share, but a chopper going in under fire to pull a team out that's in danger of being overrun, and that chopper gets shot down, and then rescued and all that. You know, these guys, they could have just taken the easy way out and said, "Oh, there's too much fire. I can't come." And there are some examples of that happening. Unfortunately, there's some examples of some pilots that I probably would not want to fly in support of my mission anymore. But 99%, there's always a bad apple here and there, no matter what the job is or what the story is. But generally speaking, these guys were fearless. I mean, they had to be, or we wouldn't be here. So, And the funny thing is, my understanding of the way they just got assigned to a group, you know, like, oh, you're a SPAD pilot. We're gonna assign you to this group, and you're gonna fly in support of these guys, and you don't need to know anything other than you'll be told where to fly.
They literally showed up and got the SOG briefing, and it's like, if you want to fly, you got to sign this. If not, get the hell out. And that's
exactly the same briefing, and it's just, I just really think that the pilots have taken a back seat in terms of their stories being told. I think the pilots have taken a back seat to the guys on the ground.
That's why we're going to be working to not only, I've got some single interviews coming up with some authors who wrote, but also getting you on with some of them to connect y'all. I think that's going to be huge, having both of y'all on at the same time.
Yeah, as Bud knows, that's something I've been pushing for a long time, and we finally got the A1 pilot. He's ready to go, so we just got to get Bud with some better internet where we can also show pictures.
Yep, it won't be long now. We're right there at it. So hopefully another show or two, and we'll off the phone, and we'll be good to go. But is there everybody seems to be content with what you're saying, you know, and our get ideas for what's coming up. Do you have anything else that you might want to let them know about, or?
Oh man, I've got about a half hour left, but I don't want to just sit here and talk to be talking.
We can always do a part two. Like I said, we barely covered anything. We can get a part two in.
Well, is there anybody left listening that?
Oh, we've got 29, but they're all just saying they're on board for having for what we've been discussing.
And again, I hope it's not just me, but I just really think having some joint shows.
It's not been done.
Yeah, but it'll pull out stories that otherwise, if it's just one guy talking, some of these stories might not come to light, you know. And but I just really think the differences between the three CCC, CCN, and CCS, and the differences between what the pilots saw and what we saw, I think those would be interesting. I know they're interesting to me. So
they will. And like you said, we're going to get a lot, because folks only know the little bit about the either the pilots or the helicopter folks from John Plaster getting little blurbs from them, and them speaking to you who were on the ground, y'all mixing it up and getting stories that no one's ever heard before. So I think that's those types of shows are going to be our best bet on really knocking it out of the park.
Yeah. So,
yeah, I'm good today. If you want to put a pin in it till part 2,
it's all yours, bud. If you want to keep going or stop, if there's no more comments or questions, I mean, we're just kind of
folks are just saying, well, Jason's got a comment or a question, and after that, it's pretty much just people agreeing.
In a small scale, there was always strap hangers from mostly not entirely, but mostly officers, because knowing how the military is structured, these officers, when you start talking about career and promotions and all that, man, if they got a CIB, it looks really good on their record, as opposed to not having one, because then they were just a REMF, and a REMF, REMF, rear echelon motherfuckers, right?
And I mean, and you can imagine, like he was illuminating with the recon teams. Imagine going out and all you're trying to do is get a CIB or whatever, and it just so happens the time you go out, either the recon team or the Hatchet force gets into some big shit, so to speak, and there you are, not only getting a CIB, but you can write yourself up for a medal and not have to go into the field ever again. And there you are, you're set for life, but for Vietnam actions.
And I'm not going to mention any names, but yes, that happened. That happened.
Oh yeah.
And then there's other strap hangers, Bob Howard being the most prolific of all of them. Howard, even though the first 2 times he got put in for the Medal of Honor, and when I knew him, I wasn't even aware of that. He went out just because he was a certified badass, and he didn't like sitting in supply. He wanted to be out in the field with the guys blowing caps and blowing shit up. And so he was forever strap hanging. And he got really pissed when they stuck him in supply and said, you can't go to the field anymore, because if you get the Medal of Honor, we don't want you to be dead. We want you to go to Washington and get it. And he wasn't a happy camper. So when he got the Medal of Honor, when he went on that mission, when my buddy Jim Jerson got killed going after my other buddy Bob Sheridan's body, they took him. They let him go, but they weren't happy about it.
Mike Shepard tried sneaking him out one time, and they raised Cain on Mike Shepard and Mr. Bob, and told Bob in no uncertain terms, you best get that LBE off of you and get your ass back in the S4 office, and don't you ever come out of there again.
Yep, exactly. Let's see, we've heard about guys only running one recon mission and realizing they were in over their heads and getting out of SOG. I think, Jason, that in Hatchet Force, you were more comfortable or secure because of safety in numbers. I've never heard of an entire Hatchet Force being overrun, but we've all heard of a number of recon teams being completely wiped out. So yeah, there was safety in numbers, but something that you can't teach in training is you can do all the drills and like immediate action drills and all this different stuff. You can do that all day long. But what you can't teach is how someone is actually going to react under fire. I don't care how much training you do. the proof is in the pudding when you get out there and you get in your first firefight is when you're going to see. And there were guys in both Hatchet Force and more so in Recon teams. Yeah, one time out, and it's like, oh shit, this ain't for me.
Nope.
And
even guys with combat experience. I mean, guys from the 173rd were like, "This is insane. I'm not doing this."
Well, yeah, because being on a Recon team in Laos, sterile, knowing that, well, and it wasn't true that we're going to disavow all knowledge of you, but you get a guy from a conventional unit that's used to going out there in a whole company or a battalion or whatever, and then he goes to SOG and is in Recon, and it's like, oh shit, what did I get into? If you had a guy that froze in combat, I guarantee you the day that they got back to camp, that son of a bitch was on a plane out of there, never to be heard from again. And he's going to go to some leg unit. You can't have somebody that's going to freeze up on you in a combat situation. You just can't. So, yeah, I mean, you had guys that volunteered for Special Forces. They might have been good out on an A camp or something. But in Recon or Hatchet Force, it's a whole different world, baby. And I know an individual, again, I won't name, at this point, it doesn't do much good to name names, but this guy, to me, and I was in the field with him a few times, I wouldn't want him watching my back anymore. He was a person that I just didn't feel comfortable with. And he managed to last some missions, but I just didn't feel comfortable with him. And when you get a feeling like that, it affects how you're going to perform under fire, because you're worrying, is this guy going to freeze up on me? Can I depend on him? Whatever. And, I think there was a fair amount of that. Oh, I'm a Green Beret, man. I go home and wow the girls and all that shit. Yeah, what's your job? Well, I'm an S1, lieutenant in S1. I'm personnel. I cut orders and write up awards and all that kind of stuff. Well, can you talk about some missions? I've never been on any missions. I know a captain, and I don't know if he listens to these podcasts or not, but I know that he had his first sergeant write him up for a couple of different Silver Stars.
Oh.
But see, that's how the officers get promoted.
Oh yeah. Just being in the area of what y'all are doing. You're getting participation medals. Yeah,
exactly. If you look at, for instance, my medals and compare them to somebody today that's never even been in combat, and they got a fucking chest full of medals, and it's all those participation medals that we didn't have back then. Oh, you on your notes, you didn't bring it up. You wanted to talk about the Presidential Unit Citation.
Yes, the PUC. The PUC.
Okay. Yeah, Presidential Unit Citation. This is what forced the government or the Army to declassify the SOG stuff. Was it 1991 or 92? SOG specifically was awarded a Presidential Unit Citation for what we did over there, which to have not all of Special Forces, but just the segment of SF that was SOG awarded something like that was unheard of. Never been done before. And SOG was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. I have a copy of it out in my workshop on what I call my war wall. And it's something to really be proud of. I didn't know about it until after 2 years after it was done, but I eventually got a copy of it. I would have been there. I would have gone to Bragg for the ceremony if I knew about it. But that's what forced, if you look at the dates when all these books started coming out, and you look at the date, it was once it got declassified. Because otherwise you were still under that non-disclosure. So
yeah, that's I mean, and it's a lot of historic units, and I hate yet again. It seems like the Recon guys got to be there and collect everything. But I'm really glad that all of the SOG men, sorry about that, that y'all got recognized and received the PUC and all of that. Did you get yours mailed to you and able to where you have it on your uniform or?
Fuck no.
Jeez.
No, I actually had to buy a copy of the PUC. Yes.
God almighty.
Exactly.
That makes me so.
It's exactly the original, and it was professionally done, but I had to damn buy it because I didn't know anything about the ceremony. They didn't make any attempt that I'm aware of to try to contact everybody. I've been a member of the Special Operations Association for 45 years now. I didn't hear about it, So I don't know the guys that were there. How did they hear about it? How did they know to go? I don't know.
From what I saw, Plaster was the big dog running, and I guess he let people know what was going on. I don't know. That's a thing that still bothers me a bit on who was there and who didn't get invited and didn't know about what was going on.
I'm not
that's neither
positive.
here.
Yeah, I'm not positive, but I don't know if there were any Hatchet Force guys actually physically there for the ceremony.
Like I told you, from pictures I saw, the only Hatchet Force men I saw were CCN men that quickly went to Recon or were Recon that were on Hatchet Force. But it was majority. It was Plaster, a few CCC guys, but the majority I saw were Eldon Bargewell, Plaster, Tilt, Pat Eddington, and all of the CCN big guys.
All the guys that have written books.
Yeah.
I guess I should have wrote a book. I don't know.
Yeah, you needed your press agent to get you to where you could be out there.
Yeah, you were a little bit young back then.
Yeah, I was a little too young. What do you want to be ready? And we've hit we've almost hit 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Is
there anybody left?
We've still got 28, but the comments and all of that have kind of died off, and they're just ready to support us on what we got coming up when I get the computer fixed. So, if you'd like to plan for maybe we can talk after, maybe next week or sometime like that. We can get a part two if maybe some people comment and got some stuff they want us to talk about or any more terms to describe, and we'll jump in there and do something else.
That's fine.
And everyone is saying thank you. They're always glad for you spending time with us and sharing as much as you do. So I just wanted to let you see all of that. Thank you so much.
I say this every one of these. This is what, my 8th one now or 7th?
I don't know. Yes,
I say this after every one, but I just find it very humbling to see the amount of interest that there is after so many years of it being secret squirrel shit. It's very humbling to see the amount of interest that there is in what we did. Because back then, we got no recognition other than medals. And when we came home, we sure as hell got no recognition. So it's a very humbling thing to me anyway. And I'm not doing this for the money. I'm not pushing a book. I know that probably pisses some guys off, but that's the way it is. I'm not doing this to make money or gain fame or anything else. I enjoy talking about it.
Yeah. Somebody wanted to make sure you were recovering from your surgery.
That's another story.
And
I
that's
had
like, go ahead. I interrupted again.
So what he's talking about, I had my 41st surgery last month. I had a spinal cord stimulator put in a few years ago and it kept failing. And I finally had it taken out. So now I've gotten an MRI on my lower back and I see the doctor on the 29th. But I'm possibly looking at 3 more major surgeries. I think they're going to have to redo my one hip replacement. And then I've got a nerve problem in my lower back. And then whatever's wrong with my spine. So hopefully on the 29th, I'll see. I'm tired of being cut on, but at least I wake up every morning, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you've had so many, and I hope you get this taken care of, because ever since we've been speaking, you've had some rough goes with it. Another person, thank you for your time. Someone wanted to try and get you on the SOG Prairie Fire game.
You know, the 2 buddies I had lunch with yesterday were asking me, and I couldn't think of the name of it. They asked me if there's any like video games about SOG or anything. Last September, when I went to the 5th group reunion down at Fort Campbell, and they did the presentation of the display of Ken Bora and Howard and them, they have the video playing on a big screen TV on the wall behind it. And the graphics is pretty damn awesome.
Oh,
and I'm hoping, I don't know if he is or not, but I'm hoping Rob Graham, I don't know if he owns the company that developed that or not, but I'm hoping he'll be down there again this year to talk to him about a certain CD of Extractions Under Fire that may think about incorporating some of that into their video, because it'd be the real deal. You know?
Oh yeah, I got to not only at least watch and play a little bit, but at SOAR, some of the more computer savvy SOG vets that have been playing and helped out jumped on there, and my God, you'd think they are 18-year-old kids or 16-year-old kids on there playing Xbox, just annihilating people and talking garbage and all kind of stuff. It's funny seeing that. But we've got what would you anything else before? We're definitely going to be a part 2. I'll because people are wanting to do a part 2 again.
Okay.
So I'll get with you later today. But did you have anything else you'd like to add before we shut down for today?
Next week I'm good any day except Thursday.
Okay. I'll get with you today and figure out our schedules and match them up.
And Jason, since you've got 15 million people on your Twitter thing, maybe I think it was helpful today too to at least have we at least had some kind of a outline of what we thought would be some of the key areas to cover. So if you can get some feedback from people and you know, because it's really hard for me sitting here, you know, to keep talking on and on. I can do it, but then what's always in the back of my mind is I don't want to be boring them with stories. Some guys, all they want to hear is the blood and guts. Some guys have said they want to hear the more personal stuff. You know, so I think the feedback really helps. I believe the SOG journalists wanted the big army to recognize SOG and what it did. After that, the rest will follow. I would have to disagree with that.
That's really why. That's really why I've had you on here before you get started, is because I wanted this to not only be an entire SOG encompassing from the Recon, Hatchet Forces, Air, and whatever else I could men I could get to sit down with me, but I quickly realized that I wanted the Hatchet Force men to be able to tell their stories, their experiences, and whatever else they'd like to share, because as you notice, we've got tons of Recon men talking, sharing, writing, And as he said earlier, the redheaded stepchildren, and that's how he's become the most visited guest on this show, is because I feel like the Hatchet forces need to be spoken for and covered for what all they did for SOG.
You got to remember time frames. So if you think about special operations and shit in today's world, it's a whole career path. Mm-hmm. Back in our day, if you were in special forces, that could be a career-ending move, because being in special forces, the top brass in Vietnam, General Westmoreland, and especially when Westmoreland left and Abrams took over, Abrams hated special forces. He was a tanker, and in his mind, all the battles should be these large-scale, thousands of men on a battlefield opposing each other and all that shit. And he let it be known that he hated special forces.
Oh, yeah.
So there was a transition in time from that mentality to what you have now, where special operations is a whole career path. Vernon Ward's a perfect example. He was able to transition and stayed in for his number of years from what I'll call the old special forces to the new special forces. And what was that last one? But I didn't.
He was giving you praise.
Great, Grandpa. Yeah. Well,
I agree with him. I agree.
Again, guys, it's a very humbling thing to do, but I'm glad that Bud has taken the initiative to get the Hatchet Force story told, because it's all a matter of scale. You got 9 guys or you got 100 guys, but the amount of people that you were up against is in proportion to that too. So the stories, they're there. I just want to see more Hatchet Force guys get on here.
Yep, and I'm that's one thing. I've got some surprises. Terry already knows we've got a new CCN name that's not really been heard of before coming on, and one Recon man who I think was smartly, he decided for him to learn, he wanted to go out with the Hatchet forces for a while. So we're actually going to have some very interesting Hatchet forces. One guy was the lieutenant who led the man I just spoke about for his entire career, while the other one went to Recon. So we've got some really interesting stuff. But before we end, I'm getting just insane types, and everybody's just saying how much they're loving you. Wow. But you can't get enough of that. People are wanting to hear. I said later in the episode, or earlier when he visited, he spoke about tactics. But I guess we're getting new viewers, and they're wanting to hear next episode if we could talk a little bit more about your personal tactics and Hatchet Force tactics.
Give me if I'm pronouncing that right, no. Give me an idea of what you're talking about, the sneaky stuff, because that'll help us plan this next one.
Let me go back. Where is some sneaky? He was talking about
detailed stuff.
Yeah, gosh, there's so many. Boy, we've got a heck of a line of comments today, and I can't even find it. He was talking about on one, being able to sound quiet, pre-mission, making sure everything was quiet, training repertoire, stuff like that. I'm trying to find the exact question, but stuff like that. If you'd be interested in doing that,
whatever. Yeah, I mean, whatever. Just keep in mind the word sneaky implies quiet. You get 105 guys out there, there ain't nothing quiet about it. And that was the intent. I mean, it was never said that was the intent, but the whole idea was for the Hatchet Force to go out there and get in a big fight where you could kill a bunch of them with airstrikes. I mean, that was that was the plan all along. So, yeah.
I'm getting here we go. I'm getting people to go to your older appearances because these guys are new fans.
Okay.
Thankfully, I'm glad y'all are here. By the way, unit tactics as well as like fire and maneuvers and stuff y'all drilled on pre-operations.
And I think I covered that in pretty great detail in either number 2 or number 3 of my thing. Probably number 2.
So. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share both of those on my channel, Hip Genosis, and who else was it? Lord Winterfell. I'll share the earlier Terry visits to where y'all can listen and see if he doesn't answer what y'all like, y'all can get with me and we'll go into further detail if we need to. But I think he covered pretty damn good stuff.
Okay, Hip, your question about booby traps. So since I can't know everybody and what their background is and what they know and don't know, I don't want to talk down to people, but I have to explain it in terms that I'm used to. Yeah, we did. I mean, we laid a couple of examples, toe poppers. Those were the little round M26 mines, and it was a little plastic thing. Oh, I don't know, about an inch and a half, 2 inches high, and about that big around. And you twisted the top to arm it, and you could plant it in the ground and just cover it with some leaves or something. And if somebody stepped on it, they're going to blow their leg off, or their foot anyway. We generally would booby trap wherever we RO'd. When we'd leave out of there in the morning, we'd leave little surprises behind, like the toe poppers. And then we also, say you're moving along and you're being followed, you might set a couple of claymores with time delay fuses and stuff like that. Trying to ambush a convoy to try to take a prisoner. In one of my interviews, I told the story. I was fascinated with explosives, but I was trained as a weapons guy, not a engineer or demo guy. So my idea to take a prisoner was take a C rations can and pack it with C4, and then put a toe popper on top of it and put it out in the road. And the North Vietnamese, they like to every one of them in a convoy would try to drive in the same set of tire tracks for that reason, because they knew if there's a bomb, the first truck's going to blow it up, and, they didn't want to get blown up. So you would bury that in the tire tracks, cover it with some dust and stuff. Well, since I wasn't trained as a demo guy, my idea didn't work too well, because I was killing the drivers, destroying the trucks and all that shit. So they quit letting me be the one to plant the demo. And then other guys would do stuff different. And then I talked earlier, and I don't know if he was on or not yet. We had those little transistor radios that we would leave behind, and it would send I don't know if it was radar or what, it would send a signal up, and then they'd work airstrikes on top of it, because they knew the bad guys would come into our RONs and see what they could scavenge up. Well, hell, here's a little transistor radio, and they turn it on, and next thing you know, there's bombs coming from the heavens. So I think that was a pretty cool trap. And then, of course, you had, the eldest son and pole bean and all that, the doctored ammo. I think I only did one mission where we used the mortar rounds, because the recon team had found a fairly large cache of mortar rounds and RPGs and all that kind of stuff, big stuff. And so they sent us in with all this. We brought in a whole bunch of mortar rounds that had been fixed. And, we put them in the ammo cache, and we tried to leave it to look like nobody had been in it, of course. And, and as I said earlier, like the AK ammo, we'd have maybe 10 rounds wrapped in a piece of cloth, and we'd leave one here and there or along the trail or whatever, and some idiot would walk along and pick it up. And next time he needs to load his magazine, he uses that ammo, and when he goes to fire, it blows up on him. So there was a lot of different, and by far the things that I've described is not all of the different things that we did. There's a lot of stuff. It's just everybody had their own little preferences or whatever for what they would do, and sometimes it was the situation that dictated what you were going to do.
Wow. Yeah, everyone's saying this is exactly what they wanted to hear. Wow, we just broke the 3-hour mark.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah, guys, we're gonna put a pin in it. Oh no, it's absolutely fine. This is why we do these. We're capturing oral history, and this is exactly what we want to hear. Mr. Terry sharing some awesome stuff.
My bladder's about ready to explode.
Yeah, I was about to say I'm about to piss my pants also.
Yeah.
Guys, I've saved these questions for the next time. Mr. Terry, is there anything else you'd like to say before we close?
Just please keep the questions coming, or we're not going to be able to keep doing this. We really rely on the questions.
Absolutely.
And the more questions Bud gets ahead of time, the more it helps us kind of plan out how we're going to do the interview.
And those of y'all that did not watch live and are watching after the fact, if y'all have any questions that weren't asked or answered, or anything you'd like to know more, by all means, comment under the video. I check every comment. I reply to every comment, and that'll help out greatly as well. So, Terry,
and I would suggest that the newer guys, especially, go back and watch the earlier interviews. And Bud's got mine numbered 1, 2, and 3, and then there's a couple others that were like Q&A sessions. And one was the show and tell, where I showed some stuff. Go back and watch
all
them.
Of those are under live. Those are under the live category on my page.
You got to go to live. I had a hell of a time figuring out where to go until he told me go to live. So they're all there, and that'll answer, I guarantee you, it will answer probably 99% of your questions. It's not that we mind answering them again, because as we get newer people, but spread the word to go back and watch those other interviews, because, we
there's
cover
some gold
in
there.
Yeah.
There's some good stuff in there. Good stuff. So
we'll, I'm
taking questions down right now that we'll get ready for, and everybody's saying, sorry, please go piss before you blow your bladder up. So
I'm holding
I'll be in touch with you later on this afternoon, and I hope you have a good afternoon, sir.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
See you later. All righty, guys. This is wonderful. Hypnosis. I apologize. I don't know how in the hell I banned your thing on this, and this is on my phone, so I don't think it'll happen again. I apologize about that. It's so hard doing this on my phone. I don't get to show photos. I'm having to click little buttons to get y'all's comments, and then type comments while I'm making sure everything's going correctly. So I apologize about that, y'all. But y'all did good today. It was very, very slow for about the first 15 minutes. I think there were 3 people in here, and we hit a record of, I think, 33. So outstanding. Of course, we didn't get into a lot. I had, an entire list, and those papers that Terry was holding, those are, 5 or 6 pages that I sent him that he printed out, and, we barely covered any of it. So we're probably going to do a part 2 of something like this where y'all can ask him. Jason, no worries, brother. I just appreciate you doing it and getting stuff out there for us. Oh yeah, man, you don't understand. I've got notebooks and notebooks full of SOG interviews. Over there on that guitar table, those are all notebooks of interviews, notebooks of interviews, notebooks of interviews. So yeah. But we've got a lot of interesting stuff. We've got Force Recon coming up. We've got pilots coming up. We've got gunship crew gunners on. We've got a CIA guest, Rick Prado, who was Billy Waugh's boss, coming. We've got Ben Milligan, Navy SEAL, who wrote the definitive history of the Navy SEALs, in my opinion. Water Beneath the Waves, I believe. And me and Jason Holmes are going to be doing a few shows. And always, any of y'all that want to come on and talk about certain SOG subjects are always welcome. I've got a few Gold Star families from SOG that will be coming on, and I have a few children of SOG that are going to be coming on. So we've got a huge end of the month, and all of next month is going to be crazy. Yeah, Jason, it's going to be Force Recon week or month next month. We've got Colonel Finlinson with his PRU work in Force Recon. We've got Doc Connor and Killer Kane, his Force Recon work. We've got Rick Rabinall in Third Force. We've got Walter Solenitsky. Guys, we have got some good stuff coming up. So if y'all can just bear with me until I can get this dadgum computer fixed and hooked up. I should say hooked up instead of fixed. It's fine. It's just the internet. Y'all can just bear with me. We are going to have some amazing guests come on. So I just absolutely hope y'all are ready and going to have some great questions and be able to join us. Ken Miller is so learned and intellectually funny. He's a great guy. I love him and Gary. I spoke to Gary when I first started interviewing veterans a few years ago, and both of them are outstanding gentlemen. And I'm trying to get them on. We've got a project. We also got Project Delta vet and a Mike Force vet. I've got a calendar full of names. This is just a few right here that I've already got that are coming on. Of course, I've got to have Jason Economos come on to talk about General Proposition and General Proposition 2 that he's working on. But we have got some big stuff on the way. The Baz, the man he was just talking about, Don Fulton, he was Covey. He is going to be coming on. He's going to be coming on solo first. Then he's going to do an interview with Terry, doing ground and all that differences. But I'm going to reconnect him with the team he saved, RT New York, Ed Walkoff, who was my first interview, and John Blah, who I interviewed as well. He was the radio man for Ed on RT New York. Don Fulton saved them, and they've not spoken, but they've not connected since then. And I'm going to get all three of those together for a show. Yes, I will start doing specific shows days, because I know it can be quite annoying for a random day to just pop up and it be a show. So I'm going to do that. Usually Mondays are always a day, and maybe Thursdays. And then the weekends I'll start doing some fun stuff with Jason and my buddy Brandon, who is a POW advocate, and we'll be doing stuff about that. But yes, I'm gonna start getting a normal broadcasting day to where I'm not flying by the seat of my pants, because I know that can be annoying. By the way, Pucker Factor, stories from veterans, you can get that on Amazon. I'm featured in volume 2. Great book. I've been given these shirts to advertise, but I hope y'all enjoyed it. Like I said, email me, find me on Instagram, find me on Facebook. Let me know any ideas y'all might have, or if anything you just like to talk about or tell me. I'm always open. Or if Jason, you can get Jason in touch with me. That'd be fine. Pat Mitchell. Unfortunately, my man, Pat Mitchell, just sadly, he passed away about 2 years ago. I would love to have Pat on. He was a awesome man, RT Colorado. But he sadly passed away. So, is that like when you're yes, that's exactly what pucker factor is. Pucker factor is when that sphincter gets to where you couldn't drive a railroad tie in it with a sledgehammer. So yes. Sadly Pat's passed away. He was a damn good man. He had a car wreck, if I'm not mistaken. Him and his wife passed away in very, very sad circumstances. But I think we had a good show today. I thank y'all. Let me know if y'all have got anything else. Please like, subscribe, share. It helps out getting new subscribers and everything. And we can start getting more and more guests because when I share this and to people who aren't sure what's going on with it and they see all the interaction, they immediately jump on board to do it. So it helps out with all of y'all participating like y'all do. So Jason, Hypnosis, Lone Wolf, thank y'all for watching. Baz, all of our new viewers, Daniel, Lean Man, Lord Winterfell, nice to see you for the first time in here. SS67350, all of y'all. My comments are so long I can't get to the very top. I do have Patreon up. Thank you, Jason. I've got a PayPal up. It should be in the show notes of this show in the description. And I'm gonna try to get it streamlined on here. I've got to rename it because the thing is a mile long, and to put it up there would take up half the screen. But if you could help me out with Patreon, I'm posting videos and never before seen photos out of my personal collection. And it would just help out a lot to not only help me with my computer update, but also get me to vets to travel to see vets and some of the reunions I've been invited to. They've invited me to interview and film at some Force Recon and the upcoming SOAR. So y'all let me know if y'all can help me out with that. But please like, subscribe, and share. I'll be in touch with y'all. Jason, thank you for all you do like usual. I'll be in touch with you later on today. I did, Baz. Thank you. I just got that. Thank you. Thank you so much. All of y'all that have done that. Thank you. Thank you. It means more than you can possibly know. I felt really bad about even trying to set that up, but Jason and some of the other guys say that I need to do it and deserve to do it for the content I'm putting out. So I I feel bad and weird about doing that, but I'm doing it. So but if you can't, I know what it's like to be broke. I'm broke. So, I'm working and doing this. So, but it's a labor of love, giving these guys a platform for their voice and to share their stories is more than anything I could ask for. So, like I said earlier, if y'all haven't seen anything, are seeing all of the shows, please go to my profile and go to the live section, and every interview, quote unquote, sit down interview will be under there. And you can tell they're over an hour. I believe the shortest is only an hour and 15. Every other is, 2.5, 2 hours. I believe this is the longest one we've done. But thank y'all for all y'all's kind words. Hypnosis. You guys get up with me, email, Instagram, Facebook, what have you. Thank you for all y'all have done today. Y'all have a wonderful day.